In June 2017, 72 of our residents tragically lost their lives in the fire at Grenfell Tower. I ask every member of the Council to pay our deepest and continuing respects in the conventional manner by marking the moment with 72 seconds of silence now. Would everyone please stand? Thank you. Agenda item 1, the minutes of the Council meeting held on the 30th of November 2022. The minutes of the previous meeting have been circulated. With these changes, are they now agreed as a correct record? In which case I will sign them. Agenda item 2, special announcements by the Mayor. I report with sadness the death of Lawrence Miles, the post-room manager, who served the Council for 36 years. Does any member wish to speak? On a happier note, I'm pleased to inform the Council that His Majesty has chosen to bestow honours on the following people connected with or resident in the borough. Professor Christopher Stringer of the Natural History Museum, Leslie Travell of the Chelsea and Westminster Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, Dr. Richard Forty of the Natural History Museum, Dr. Sandra Knapp of the Natural History Museum, Verena Cornwall, the head of Culture and Place here at the Royal Borough, Veronica Hilliard, executive head teacher, Goulburn and Maxilla Children's Centre, Lucy Maguire, founder, chief executive officer and programme director of Nucleo, and Octavius Black, who will be known to some in Norland Ward, which is my own one. I shall now ask the chief executive to report apologies for absence or lateness from this meeting.
I've received apologies from Councillors Marshall and Verboven, and I've also received apologies for lateness from Councillors El Nagi and Hargreaves.
Do any members have a disclosable pecuniary interest in any matter before the Council this evening? In that case, agenda item 5 is public speaking. I will invite those who have registered in advance to speak to address the Council in turn for no more than 5 minutes each. A member of the leadership team and member of the principal minority party will then be able to respond for up to 2 minutes each. I will ask any speaker who reaches their 5 minutes to bring their address promptly to a close so as to ensure that all speakers have a fair and equal opportunity to be heard and to receive responses from councillors. So I'd now like to invite Lorenzo Rotondi to ask his question.
Mr. Mayor, members of the Council and members of the public, I'm here to talk to you about the importance of youth clubs in Kensington and Chelsea Borough and how we can spread awareness to improve them for the young people in our community. As many of you know, youth clubs play a vital role in the development and growth of our young people. They provide a safe and nurturing environment for our youth to learn and grow, and they can play an important role in fostering a sense of community and belonging among our young people. Now, despite the numerous benefits that these clubs offer due to the great support that specifically this borough is providing to their youth clubs, such as a safe and supportive environment for young people to socialise, engage in activities and develop important life skills, some individuals remain unaware of their existence. I recently conducted a youth club survey where 100 people, the age range around 11 to 16, were asked if they knew what a youth club was and if they could give me specific examples around the borough. Of those 100, 58% were cognizant of youth clubs and only 100% were able to give me specific examples. This lack of awareness could pose a challenge to the sustainability and growth of these clubs. So, my question to the Council before me here today is, what can be done to ensure that a premium is placed on increasing awareness of youth clubs, alongside the great help and assistance that this borough is already offering? And lastly, if possible, could we have an update on the progress of the Executive Decision Report for the restructure and redesign of youth services publicised in 2019, encompassing the new centre-based locality provisions?
Thank you. Councillor Folkes, would you like to provide a response?
Thank you. Lorenzo, thank you so much for coming tonight and to speak to us about youth services and youth clubs, because I totally agree with you. They're incredibly important and they're something that we really value in this council. And actually, we're incredibly proud of the fact that we do have so many. So in total, we spend £1.5 million on activities for children and young people in venture playgrounds and early years support, which is the 4th highest in Greater London and the 5th highest in the whole country. So actually the question that you gave me, you just said, is different to the question I was given. So I'm slightly going to now address what you just asked me today about people not knowing about them. And I absolutely agree with you. It's such a shame that people don't know that the youth clubs are there. And I know you go to Holland Park School. I don't know what Holland Park School does to tell you a lot about youth clubs and what's available there. All the youth clubs are listed on our website. All the other schools know about it, but I know we did a survey recently and we had the same result, that a lot of parents didn't know about youth clubs. So to move on to the fact that you asked about what are we going to do in our review, one of the key things about the review we're doing, first of all, we're reviewing the scope of the youth clubs to make sure that they actually reach the right people and that they reach a broad number of young people in our borough, and are they in the right place? So we'll be looking at all that. Are they delivering value and impact for their money? But also, actually, how can we get our young people, more of them, to engage with the really excellent youth club provision that we have in this borough, really wide. We have 5 youth clubs, and then we have 2 youth hubs, one in the north, one in the south. You previously asked a question about whether we had shut one down. In fact, we haven't. We're one of the very, very few boroughs that has not shut a youth club down in the last 10 years. Unlike Newham, that has shut down 30.
Councillor Folkes, your time is coming to an end.
So I hope you find that reassuring. Thank you for coming.
Councillor Abdullah Noor, would you now like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think first I would like to say thank you to Lorenzo for coming to the full council meeting and talking about youth clubs. I mean, that's where my heart lies. I've been youth worker for 9 years in the borough when I was a bit younger. So I think the issue with our youth services, we are one of the few boroughs in London which the council supports youth services. Our youth service history goes back to when EPIC, who had the council contract to run youth service, was wound down about 5 years ago. Then the council has commissioned a number of local charities and organizations to deliver youth services. There may be lack of awareness of the youth centers. My suggestion will be to the lead member is to use our newly elected youth council to carry out walkabout and some feasibility studies to look at what has been delivered locally, what center delivers what on Monday to Sunday. And that will give us a basis where the council can look at it, where there's a need for extra support, or maybe look in the other way we can improve our youth service. So thank you for coming again.
Councillor Noor, thank you for that response. And Lorenzo, thank you for asking your question. I would now like to invite David Ford to ask his question.
Good evening, everybody. My name's David Ford. I live in the borough and lived in the borough for many years. What is disappointing that FW Conway, who do a lot of your work on the roads and on pavements, seems that Earl's Court, the workmanship that FW Conways do in Earl's Court in particular, is very substandard. None of the work is checked off, and yet the payment method that FW Conways do, all the payments are signed off in full, and yet it's council taxpayers' money that is getting wasted by FW Conway, but yet in more affluent areas of the borough, i.e. Chelsea Green in particular, money's getting spent hand over fist there to a very high standard by FW Conways. So it seems that Earl's Court workmanship is very substandard. What are the council's options to... We've asked many times on the Residents Association for this to be dealt with, and yet all we get snubbed off is, you know, the person that deals with it never comes out and checks works, never comes out to sign work off. They blame it that they're still working from home. Yet, you know, the council are paying millions of pounds a year to FW Conway. That money has to be accounted for. What are the councils doing about it, please?
Thank you for that. Councillor Kamali, would you be able to provide a response?
Absolutely. Firstly, thank you for coming along this evening. I'm really sorry to hear that. In my experience with FM Conways, the workmanship and the finish is usually very good. Of course, it's on a contract, so we do have our KPIs associated with it. I'm absolutely going to make sure I come and inspect it myself. And I would also like to sort of pick up with you as to whether or not perhaps there's a bit of overlap with some of the TfL roads there. But if it is one of our pavements, absolutely it should be to the same standard as everywhere else in the borough. And after this meeting, I'll get somebody to organise something so I can come and have a walkabout with you, with our head of highways as well, and make sure that it is brought up to that standard, because that's what we are paying for. So absolutely, it's what we should get. So thank you. I'll see you.
Councillor Kamali, thank you. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for coming, David, and raising this important issue. Like yourself, I have asked this question many times in the past few years, specifically on wasting money. We all know we are going through difficult times. We need to prioritize where to spend our money. So I personally feel a lot of council money and taxpayers' money being wasted. I have seen time after time unnecessary road work. The tarmac was removed hundreds of meters. The road was perfect. You don't need to be an expert to tell the difference between a good road and a bad road. If you drive, you can't tell. A perfect road has been removed completely, and a few days later, a new tarmac was laid again. So we need to ask the lead member, to Councillor Kamali, to investigate this to make sure. I was told in the past, because we have contract, we cannot do very much. So we need to be careful who we are going to have our contracts with, and for how many years, and to spend our money wisely. Thank you.
Councillor Bakhtiar, thank you. And Mr. Ford, thank you. Okay. So, Andrew Sundell. Could I now invite Andrew Sundell to ask your question, please? Thank you.
Members of the Council, I'd like to speak about the unfairness of residents' parking charges. I drive a smart car, but it isn't relevant what I drive. I pay £22 to register my car in order to get a licence to park. Then I pay another 112, making 134. But people with EVs who are parking just as I'm parking, and the size of my car's got nothing to do with it, they pay £22 and nothing else. But they're parking just as I'm parking. If I park in a public car park and I'm parked next to a Tesla, we're both paying the same because we're both doing the same thing. We are parking, and it's grossly unfair. Now, according to the council website, the reason this is done, that the EVs only pay £22 and nothing else, regardless of how heavy they are, how much dust particles they put out from the tyres, because they put out far more because of the weight, and the tyres have to be reinforced, and they don't last very long. And it's grossly unfair. It's now, 2.5 years ago, there were 600 EVs registered in the borough paying £22 a year. So it's reasonable to presume today there's 800 at least. That's 80,000 a year if they only paid £100 a year to park. They're still getting a better deal than I've got, but I think the 134 I pay is actually extremely good value to park anywhere in the borough for a whole year. Very good value, not complaining about that. But it's wrong that also there's a moral issue. People who can buy or lease an EV, they're not hard up. They're not fiscally challenged, as it were, you know? They're not going to bother. And they might consider it a stealth tax, but we, the British public, we're used to that. You know, we take it on the chin. We do. And I live in Camden Houses, the very first council houses ever built. There are 22 beds, 21 beds, 42 beds, 41 beds, and 40 studios. Now, I'm fortunate, I have a 2-bed, but the studio flats, they're all at the front of the building. They have the old metal windows of the 1940s. You can see air, you can see daylight through the gaps between the windows and the window frames. £80,000 a year, that's if there's only 800. You know, it's a virtue signal. I understand that. You know, people do that. There's no logic to them, but they do. You can't weigh it. You can't take a tape measure to a virtue signal. It's of no value. But £80,000 a year is, you know. And the windows, my wooden sash windows principally, are very, very drafty. I have to have my thermostat at 24 to get 20 in my lounge. And if the wind's blowing, there's a Roman blind, that blows, the heavy curtains, which are lined, they move as well. And they've got 120 gas boilers running, you know? And we talk about ecology. And as for ecology, people who buy EVs, it's very low on their list. They're not going to holiday in Skegness. It could be St James's Club Antigua or the Maldives or whatever. They're not buying them for ecology. They're buying them because it's fashion or self-esteem or whatever. Anyway, £80,000 a year. Do stuff with that. Without even borrowing, you could do stuff with that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I ask Councillor Kamali again to respond to that?
Thank you, and thank you again for coming this evening. I think you've raised a really interesting point, and it's something that the council, in setting its fees and charges, obviously has to think about every year. We do want to be a very green council. We do want to encourage the least polluting forms of vehicles in our streets. One of the few mechanisms we have to encourage that is in the fees that we charge. So you're absolutely right. There is a difference between an electric vehicle who, as you say, may be able to afford it, and somebody with a vehicle that is very high polluting, and they've made a choice to purchase that vehicle. The numbers you referenced are obviously something that we can keep under review, and again, this upcoming budget, we will be looking at that because we have seen a good increase in the number of electric vehicles. But what we have also seen is a halving in the amount of nitrogen dioxide on our streets. There's myriad factors as to why that could have been, but it is true that by disincentivizing some of the more polluting vehicles, we can incentivize those which don't pollute as much. And I think in the round, that is something worth doing. The actual figures themselves will, of course, be looked at and continue to be kept under the review. And as you say, in a few years, we will all have electric vehicles in any case, so it makes sense to have a very flat rate there. But really, I think it's something where the council has been at the forefront. We've had banded parking permits for many, many years now. The change that we've had that you're referencing was really just linking it directly to the pollutant. We used to have that all in bans. So the principle of the permit has remained the same for at least 10 years. All we've done now is tie it directly to the engine's emissions. And we have seen already a shift in electric vehicles. We do still have a number of vehicles which are sort of paying over £400 for their permit because they are enormous. I think in that case it was a 16-cylinder vehicle on our streets. So, you know, the disincentive does still need to exist, but I take your point that we could perhaps look at where we set the incentive level going forward. So thank you for raising that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kamali. I'd now like to ask Councillor Dent-Code if she'd like to respond.
Eva.
Sorry, okay. Eva. Councillor Jedward, if you'd like to respond in that case. My apologies.
It's okay. Oh, he's gone. So shall I just carry on? I am sitting on an environmental scrutiny committee, and we had this issue about electric cars being put everywhere in borough from north to south. In Dalgon, unfortunately, nobody can afford these electric cars. For me, it looks like more than less. You can afford, you can have a easy ride. We don't have to you don't have to pay for parking. More than less, you are lucky to have electric car. You have a diesel, you have a petrol, well, bad luck. You have to pay extra because your car is polluting. I suggested during the scrutiny committee to set some kind of funding to help those who cannot really come out of diesel and petrol. I can understand we have this global warming. I understand we are really facing crisis of flooding everywhere. But why do you penalize poor people? I think it's a little bit too much. You have to take on board that Dalganov, for instance, does not own the car. Dalganov has not a single traffic warden coming around and checking those parking. After 6 o'clock, the parking is free. More than less, everybody goes north and parks whenever they want according to the will, annoying everybody on the free estate. So what I wanted to say is more than less, you have to review how you approach poor people who cannot come out of diesel, who cannot come, but still they have to travel to work. Maybe you can send some kind of funding, which I have already suggested, but was dismissed. And I'm very happy for gentleman to come here as a resident to bring it to our attention because he is taxpayer, he is a council taxpayer, and obviously he's a working gentleman because he has a car. Thank you.
Councillor Jedward, thank you. And Mr. Sundell, thank you for raising that topic. I would now like to invite Melanie Juno-Wolf to ask her question. Melanie, over to you now.
Thank you. Good evening. Excuse me. I am Melanie, a North Kensington mother, resident and founder of North Kensington Community Kitchen. I'm also a founding member of the North Kensington Health Matters Working Group, where I represent North Kensington Community Kitchen and the local account group. My question is as follows. How will RBKC demonstrate that North Kensington health and lives matter? Professionally engage, track and ensure the long-term health and well-being of its residents, particularly those in North Kensington who continuously, over many weeks and months, ingested contamination from the Grenfell Tower fire? How will RBKC ensure that the vital services we need to achieve our requirements, such as advanced biomedical tracking, will be in place, easily accessible, and their presence enforced? How will RBKC ensure its residents' health and life longevity, adults and children, are transparent, no longer denied, and finally put before political or other organisations' concerns? How will RBKC make reparations for this atrocity? We respectfully suggest starting through tracking and saving the lives of its children and residents. Could you please let us know how RBKC will engage, facilitate and ensure that our North Kensington community are understood and served by the outside stakeholders we need to help us model good practice, including with data collection and dissemination,
and build pathways to access health services in the short, medium and long term. Thank you.
Melanie, thank you very much for raising a topical and important issue, and as one who lives up near there, you know. So, Councillor Addenbrooke.
Melanie, thank you for coming this evening and raising this. We recognise that survivors, bereaved family members and local residents are worried about their health and well-being. And whilst the NHS is responsible for health services, including health checks and relevant follow-ups, the Council's Public Health Department has a role around monitoring the local population's health and well-being, working with clinical experts, looking at routinely available data and identifying trends. This is done in a number of ways, including population health monitoring and the North Kensington Health and Wellbeing Survey. This combination allows us to have both qualitative and quantitative data. And as part of the population health monitoring, we look at a wide range of conditions, including cancers, and this helps us to identify any health impacts at as early a stage as possible. We want to do more to share this information with local people, and we'll be doing this through refreshing the local North Kensington JSNA, a needs assessment that looks at the health and wellbeing needs of the local community. The NHS is also looking at what kind of checks are in place and is seeking advice from national experts to ensure that the processes are robust and the right things are being monitored and checked. We will encourage them to look at all possible tools as part of this, including biomonitoring. And I know you've been in contact with officers, and we've spoke a couple of times. And yes, we're all very happy to meet with you, and we do need to bring the NHS in. So thank you for coming this evening.
Could I now invite Councillor Dent-Code to respond?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Melanie, for bringing this to the Council. We're all obviously very much concerned with this in relation to, well, we've been worrying about it for 5.5 years indeed, but particularly with the recent press stories about the screening that was done with Scottish firefighters and early mortality, which was very alarming, and the other programmes which were being conducted on Grenfell firefighters, which are still underway, I understand, and the work is the research is being peer-reviewed before it's released. But we do know that some of the Grenfell firefighters have been diagnosed with cancer, and as a cancer in recovery myself, obviously this is very much taken to heart by me and many people in North Ken. It's interesting, as we know, our feelings about whether or not cancer is spreading isn't reflected in the health profiles, the annual health profiles, which I'm quite surprised about. But then, how do they record them, and how much of a delay is there? I don't know. But then I'm reminded about the response to the Grenfell cough. We were told there was no Grenfell cough, and then actually the local GPs told me they had 70 cases of Grenfell cough, of people actually coughing blood, up to 6 months after the Grenfell. So we need exactly what you're asking for, which is far more detailed and specific screening, biomedical tracking, and so on. We have written the Labour Group has written to Department of Levelling Up Communities and Housing for their response on this, for the people who are responsible for Grenfell, specifically waiting for a response to what has been happening out there and these reports. And after, I think it's 2 weeks, we haven't had a response yet. So we will pursue that. And when we get a response,
Councillor
we'll
Dent-Code, your time is coming to an end.
We will share that with everybody, but we all share your concerns, and there needs to be some serious and in-depth monitoring.
Councillor Dent-Code, thank you. And Melanie, thank you so much. If you're particularly quick, you can probably get away with it.
So thank you. I really do appreciate the engagement with this and the promise of engagement within our community. It's, of course, very important, and people are very, very concerned. It's more than concern. I'm trying to keep this as straight and straightforward as we can, but it is, of course, a very difficult subject. So what I would like to do is just to highlight how much we need to ensure there is excellence, particularly in the data collection. The fact that the Grenfell, so far, the Grenfell data collection hasn't, in our opinion, hasn't been significant, for want of a better word. And to finish off, if I could leave this with, and this is for everybody here, we do believe that this could be the biggest humanitarian issue of our time in this borough. We want to work forward to ensure that those with the least voice have access to adequate healthcare, monitoring, and to have some sense of their lives being worthwhile, and not the feeling that they're ignored somewhat and are worthless. If there is something that we can do to ensure people have something to hold on to and to have some hope, that's what we're asking for. Thank you so much.
Melanie, thank you. Can I now ask Anita Williams to ask her question, please? So I can't hear.
May I make a brief point of clarification on the response from the Labour group? I just want to add that in addition to requesting a response from the DLUCH, we have also requested a response and briefing from RBKC Public Health on the 13th of January, and we're still awaiting that, and we hope very much that will be brought forward.
I'm sure that the lead member has heard that request. Thank you. No, you've had one. What is it, Councillor Thaxter? So you'll have to speak up.
I just want to say, because we are the most affected, I think it's very important. This is something that we've raised several times with the council and other health authorities, and nothing hasn't been done. I think this is very important. And this sort of behaviour just highlights the inequality report that Councillor Dencourt placed a couple of years ago regarding these sort of health issues and inequality within North Kensington community.
I hear that, Portia. I actually live, you know exactly where I live. I'm acutely aware of it. If you want to talk more about this, might I suggest that the ideal forum would be to have a motion on this rather than to talk across somebody else's question. But I hear what you're saying. Could we now go to Anita Williams, and if you could ask your question, thank you.
Hi, my name's Anita Williams and I live in Kensal House, north of the borough again, a building that's been left in disrepair, and I'm a resident that suffers with mould, damp and condensation, and quite frankly I'm fed up. I keep wiping it down every day to try and get rid of it and to complain to the housing, and they just say open the windows and use toxic stuff to get rid of it. So my question is, why does housing continue to neglect Kensal House Estate by failing to stop damp, mould, leaks and floods, despite decades of investment programmes and a commitment to Spid Theatre's refurbishment to fulfil statutory repair and safety issues by August 2021?
Thank you. Can I now ask Councillor Taylor-Smith to provide a response?
So first of all, thank you, Anita, for coming and raising this question. So Kensal House, as I'm sure you know, was built in 1937, and it's the first modernist block in the UK designed for its purpose of providing affordable housing and also community space, and it's a great example of modernist living. It's also a Grade 2 listed building, and that's what brings a lot of challenges. So first of all, I'd have to say that it's absolutely not the case. It might feel like that you've been neglected, because we've attended 260 calls to Kensal House over the last 6 years, which is more than any other estate. Now that number shows not just attendance, but it also shows the issues that we're obviously having to deal with, which are ongoing issues, and I acknowledge that. We've also supported SPID Theatre, who make a very valuable contribution to this community and culture of the borough. So I think we can all understand that a 100-year-old building is going to be incredibly difficult to maintain, and it is also a building that's very much prone to leak. The drains in the building are very narrow, and they're internally fitted and are prone to blockage. Again, a lot of times through misuse. So your question is, what are we doing? Well, the council has instigated a programme of annual inspections, cleaning and descaling, and this is happening on some of the blocks twice a year. And also we're trying to remind residents of the importance of not putting fat down the drains and blocking the pipes. So we're also walking through the other issues on that, and as you've talked about, such as condensation. And that's something we're trialling, some mechanical ventilation, to see how that works within the buildings themselves. I mean, the critical windows, which are part of the listing, and the poor insulation, can lead to a lot of damp and condensation, and we can see that. And we have to look at each individual flat to see what needs to be done. So all of these challenges are challenges that we also are subject to strict planning rules on the listed buildings with regard to changes to the external.
2 minutes.
So I would just reaffirm our commitment to both you at Kensal House and the rest of our housing stock, which are all subject now to a major refurbishment programme to bring them up to stand. But I apologise for the problems that you've had.
Thank you. May I now ask Councillor Jeddett to provide a response? And you have slightly longer than 2 minutes.
For coming. I really appreciate it. I visited last Saturday and I've been really shocked. This is allowed in 21st century when human rights guarantee your right to safe home. Let me start somewhere here. Just more or less unravel why, because your question is why. I gather there were 217 leakages between 2016 and current. It's quite a big number, right? It's a listed building. So let me unravel. In 1981, Margaret Thatcher was advised to leave Liverpool to manage decline. In 2022, in August, Rishi Sunak admitted taking money from the most deprived areas by diverting them to the more deserving places, a quote. Kensal House, built in 1933 and 36, was the very first urban village in Britain. When completed, it was quite obvious that this is place for workers on the highest at that time level. And it was a statement for social housing. This is how this could be now as we talk. So it's more or less 100 years later, we have what we have, and this is quite shameful. However, in the recent years, this is what was in 1936, Kensington and Chelsea decided to seal ventilation system throughout the building. There is no ventilation whatsoever, suffocating the building against the plants and suffocating residents inside. As you mentioned, you have condensation, you have mold growing. This is exactly the managed decline. Why is that? Let's see what happens across the road, what happens across the canal. We have the Anglican chapel with catacombs, built in 1833, listed grade 1. What happens there? It's planned to supposed to be a bridge over the canal, and a chapel, it's at the moment as we speak, declining its state. Instead of taking some money, putting into investment, take it as literally out of trouble, no. It is waiting and waiting. However, there are money for Opera Holland Park, given on the spot. Why not there? Let's say what happens literally across the road, Canalside House, built in 1929. The future is uncertain. I gather somebody was told that it might be under sale.
Councillor Jeddett, you've had a very generous 2 minutes.
Just to literally overcap it.
If you can conclude, please.
So to conclude more or less what it is, why it's allowed, it's a managed decline, indicating that this council management is in wrong hands, destroying our heritage. This is our heritage. And there are no funds put aside for this kind of project.
Thank you, Councillor Jeddett. Can I thank you, Ms. Williams, for your question? Thank you. There being no more questions, sorry, there is one more. Is there one more? Okay. I will read out George Hart's question. Hello, noise pollution is a major issue affecting our streets. Noise limits are being breached on an almost constant basis, both by cars with deliberate modifications and motorbikes. The impacts of this are having a major detriment to the health of individuals and our wider community. Research has demonstrated the damage that noise pollution does to our health, form heart disease, and high blood pressure to stress and inflammation. Equally, it puts people off the streets and therefore their local community. This too has negative impacts on our health. I speak for many people in the area who feel this has gone on for too long and want the council to take immediate steps to ensure that lawbreakers are caught and that noise pollution is properly tackled as a matter of urgency. Can I ask Councillor Kamali to answer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to George. I'm sorry he wasn't here this evening. I'll also be issuing, obviously, a written response. But, you know, we touched upon air pollution earlier tonight, and noise pollution is something that the council takes equally seriously. We were the first in the country to implement acoustic cameras, and for want and for trying, TfL have finally relented and allowed us to put them on their network as well, where so much of the noise occurs. I'm happy to announce we already have 4 up and running, 2 of which are on the TfL roads. We have 2 more going up this week, and we have 2 more which are on order. The problem of having a good solution is that many other people are trying to copy us, and so now we have to get our orders in quickly. I'd like to find out where Mr. Hart lives so that we can work with their local ward councillor to see if there is an area that perhaps we'd be able to install another camera. It's been a fantastic success. We've had very few repeat offenders, and I believe nearly 500 tickets have been issued. So it's absolutely a problem that we are cracking down on and something that we will continue to crack down on. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kamali. Councillor Dencode, if you'd like to respond. For 2 minutes.
Thank you. And this is a very good question because it does drive people to distraction. Supercars and motorbikes, we're getting them more and more in the north, unfortunately. And it's not only the noise, which is horrific. They are, of course, speeding, and it's very dangerous. Some years ago, I persuaded the council to do some speed monitoring in St Helens ward, and the fastest speed they recorded was 130 miles an hour in St Helens Gardens, which is enough to demolish a house. And just 3 years ago, a car speeding in Cheston Road hit 70 miles an hour, crashed into a house and demolished the facade. So these are very, very dangerous as well as being noisy. And I'm reliably told that Exhibition Road, the speeding that's happening there, is very attractive to people who are like that kind of thing because it looks like a video game. So that's not good. The single surface makes it look like a video game, so that's not good at all. We have to discourage all of that. We have, various problems of coexistence with noise and people working from home and so on, and we've got this problem at Power Square at the moment where people are talking about the Human Rights Act. They have a right of peaceful enjoyment, and if they can't work at home and if there's constant noise all day from, in that case, it's sports right in front of their homes, then they're not enjoying peacefully their homes. So we have to clamp down on this, obviously, not only punitive, but can we please make it antisocial and unattractive like we've done with smoking and lots of other very bad habits. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dencode. I think there really are no more questions from our residents. Do any members have any petitions to present? I'm not aware of it, but if anyone wants to put their hand up now. In which case, I now invite the Leader of the Council to address the meeting for up to 5 minutes. Councillor Campbell.
Good evening, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. My remarks are short tonight in an effort to give my colleagues more time to discuss a huge amount of important topics. I can report, however, that next month I'll be bringing a new council plan to this meeting, a plan to map out the early stages of becoming the best council, meeting a challenge set by the bereaved and survivors from Grenfell. A plan which outlines how we want to work with communities and partners to create a borough that is greener, safer, fairer. This will be underpinned by a workforce plan for our own staff, building on the values that we expect people to work by and the skills we expect them to demonstrate. So my thanks goes to all of the people in this borough who took part in the consultation and engagement to help shape these plans. Mr. Mayor, it's also important that councillors lead by example, and tonight we have a new code of conduct being introduced, and I would encourage all of us to read it and work to it. Kensington and Chelsea should be at the forefront of honesty, transparency, and we should lead the way in terms of positive debate. I hope that's going to be demonstrated in the debates in the chambers tonight. And finally, Mr. Mayor, it was heartening to see the words written by Michael Gove at the weekend. It's important to families that the government understands the role it played in the Grenfell tragedy. The words would have come far too late for many people, and I understand that. But with the apology also comes action. And if local government and national government can work together, we can have safer housing for people across the country, and that will be a meaningful legacy. Thank you.
Councillor Campbell, thank you. I now invite Councillor Dentcode to respond for up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've rather missed our loved one from the leader that we normally get at the beginning of these meetings, but there we are. Let's head straight back into reality here. Mr. Mayor, 2 adults were found dead in my ward in their flat on Monday morning. I don't know the circumstances of that. We have yet to find out. But it's very, very upsetting. But the local word is that it was a couple who had just faded away. And that is deeply shocking. If that is what has happened, we'll find out eventually. It's deeply shocking in my ward that something like that can happen. We just don't expect it. It shouldn't happen. And somewhere along the way, there are failures, and we are all responsible for that in some way. I want to talk about the census information that has been coming through over the last few2 So the findings are being released. We've had statistics on demography, ethnicity, and the labour market, and there are 2 further releases, including health, disability, and unpaid care, which is absolutely essential, especially in this borough. And that's coming out sometime this month, I think. Some of them have been a bit delayed. There's an awful lot to get our heads around in the census results. The loss of more than 15,000 residents in 10 years has huge implications. And the loss for from some of our wealthier wards of over 1,000 households, that's over 2,000 residents, have abandoned Brompton and Handstown. So are their former homes empty now as well? What's their nationality? Did their departure relate to Brexit or some other reason? When did they leave? What are the financial implications for government funding? All these questions must be analysed in the months ahead, because we really need to understand what has happened here. We find in the last 3 years the number of babies born has dropped, which will have a huge effect on school placements in the years to come. Child vaccinations have also dropped from a woeful 73% to a pitiful 70%, the target being 95%, and we are one of the worst in London for vaccine take-up, including children. Our early years literacy needs attention, with 1/3 of our Year 6 children not attaining a good level of literacy that will see them thrive in secondary school. And while they may start in reception class with just 20% of children overweight by Year 6, this is increased. Is nearly doubled to 37%. Are we focusing on access to healthy food and sports activities for our young people? A shocking 1/3 of looked after children who are often vulnerable to grooming by criminal gangs absent themselves regularly from school. Where is our programme to tackle this? Are we failing in our duty of care to them? We have a pitiful rate of apprenticeship starts and even worse completion rates of apprenticeships, with an unemployment rate of 30%, which may or may not be connected. Some people choose not to work. Will we focus on good apprenticeship programs for our young people to fill the gaps in construction personnel, support them into retail or hospitality employment, where we're suffering huge staff shortages in the borough? What are we doing about the 1/3 of 19+ residents who never participate in further education and skills training? Screening for cancer, Mr. Mayor, is a pitiful rate of 65% attendance, and nobody knows more than me how early cancer detection can save lives. My life was literally saved because I took up screening. I must hope that what we've been hearing now, those fearful of potential cancer, will take up their invitations to screening. It's not nice, it's uncomfortable, it's embarrassing, it's humiliating, but it can save our lives. And we will press for mass screening across North Kent. Nearly half of Kensington and Chelsea adults are overweight, which can be an indicator for all kinds of conditions that can shorten life. How can we keep older people more active? For myself, I'd love to feel safe cycling around the borough, but I don't. So my bike is gathering dust in my hallway. Since 2019, rates of dementia have gone up by nearly 9%. Are we accounting for that in our long-term plans for adult social care and health? As we all know by now, life expectancy in some parts of the borough is increasing, fantastic. But in other areas, particularly in Kensal Town, which is the most deprived area of London, life expectancy is dropping. The links to ethnicity, food poverty, and poor educational attainment and lack of skills are related, and we must analyse these connections and, most importantly, do something about it. Are we?
Councillor Denko, your 5 minutes is up.
I was just going to finish, thank you. Mr. Mayor, what we feared in 2016 has come to pass. The effects of us leaving the EU has had terrible effect on our economy. So let's see if our council, who has our Brexit-loving council, who seems to be very well funded still, will actually attack
Councillor
these.
Denko, can
I'm
you?
just finishing, Mr.
No,
Mayor.
you are. You are half a minute overdue.
Issues that have worse.
I gave you half a minute's notice and you still couldn't finish on time. Can we now move to, in accordance with standing orders, I rule that the order of business shall be as printed in the agenda. Item 9, I now invite Councillor Kamali to propose the adoption of the local plan review for independent examination.
I beg to propose.
And is there a seconder? Councillor Bennett, thank you. I now invite Councillor Kamali to speak for up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I wish to start first by thanking the officer team that have dedicated so many hundreds of hours to this incredible tome we have before us. The agenda shows it is over 5,000 pages. They have compiled evidence to defend our policies, reasoned arguments out of consultation responses, and most importantly, they have listened to our residents. This plan has been widely consulted, and where options existed, officers have been fair to hear all sides of the debate, whilst consistently reflecting on the Council's approach to be open, to listen, and to deliver. I'd also like to thank my predecessor at this point for putting in so much effort and legwork to get this plan delivered at the pace that which we were challenged by. No one single plan can please everybody, but it is a testament to the work our officers have done that this plan before us, I believe, offers good, sound, practical policies for RBKC to help shape the next decade and beyond. A local plan, by its very nature, is a plan, a roadmap consisting of broad principles for the Council to work towards. The plan is particularly focused on a number of key themes. Front and centre is our commitment to a green-blue future, where we set out clear policies to help us cut emissions, green our housing stock, and implement new technology sensitively into RBKC. We've already got a strong record, Mr. Mayor, in cutting emissions, having halved them already in the last 5 years. But we know that 80% of the borough emissions come from buildings, so this is where we must challenge our energy to help shift homes from being leaky sieves of fossil fuels into warm, well-insulated, draft-free homes powered by renewables. Beyond our greening plans, this local plan has one underlying objective throughout, and that is homes. The ghastly term units is no way to describe homes for new RBKC residents, but this is a nationally recognised language, and so does remain within. We must always remember, though, that a unit is somebody's home, their space to enjoy and to cherish. We know also that the national context is a tricky one. Balancing supply and demand is the basis of our economic model, and it is clear to all that supply has not kept up pace with demand. We are a small and incredibly dense borough, but we too must play our part to unlock areas which can provide the appropriately scaled housing our new residents need. Our opportunity areas will necessarily do the bulk of this delivery, but RBKC is also home to several sites that sit outside conservation areas, and we must carefully manage what comes forward to both deliver homes, but also the amenities and services to local existing residents. Encapsulated within this plan, Mr. Mayor, is the clear understanding that the Royal Borough is a place of beautiful built form and heritage. From our family-sized Victorian homes in St Helens to the grand stucco of Queensgate, the quirky artist residence of Chelsea to the industrial units of Latimer Road. All of these areas play an important role in making RBKC a fantastic place to live and to visit. Protecting these unique areas is a core part of our policy. Our local plan gives us the policies to protect and enhance these areas, with further work to be overlaid with design codes and character studies to define exactly what we will do and what we want to see on our streets. Our well-articulated policies in the conservation and design section protect our heritage assets whilst also being innovative, such as where we can adapt to facilitate solar panels or double and triple glazing in listed properties. They also help to protect and improve upon our already wonderful parks and open spaces, making a commitment to improve our parks whenever development occurs nearby, and indeed to create new parks across Kensington and Chelsea. A key plank in this local plan is also in regards to our high streets and to business. We are fortunate in RBKC to have fantastic market streets in the form of Portobello and Golborne, but also weekend markets on Duke of York Square, Bute Street, and indeed outside the Town Hall, to name a few. This plan protects these uses and designations and seeks to further improve access to markets across the borough. Our retail high streets operate in an ever-changing market economy, one where we have seen huge shifts to online shopping, but where residents still greatly value the benefit of being out and about, seeing friends, and popping into our high street stores. Retail suffered greatly during COVID, and we must continue to help the high streets bounce back. Our place-shaping programme across the borough seeks to do so by investing in our public realm and creating areas where people want to spend time, to shop, and to invite their friends to visit. We also want our borough to be a home to jobs, Mr. Mayor, encouraging investment from businesses.
And your 5 minutes is up, Councillor Kamala, so can you please
Last paragraph.
Conclude
Absolutely.
quickly?
Investment from businesses to set up shop, to employ their staff locally and to spend locally. And I'll jump to the summation. Mr. Mayor, in summation, this document we have before us seeks to strike the right balance for RBKC to fiercely protect what we hold dear,
Councillor
but
Kamali,
also
I think it's
to
time to sit down, please. Councillor Bennett, would you like to speak for up to 5 minutes? And please,
Yes.
Both the previous speakers have slightly erred.
Okay, I will.
So if you can be less than that, it would be a good thing.
I will do my best, Mr. Mayor. Planning in London has a long and predominantly august history. I did a bit of research on this and found in 1302, one Thomas Batt was hailed before the mayor on a charge of neglecting to put tiles instead of thatch on his house. And just a few years after that, someone else was brought before the mayor because he built the chimney in the wrong place and not of plaster and stone. Now, I couldn't find out who brought these charges. Presumably, the Amanda Frayne or Michael Bark of their day. And quite right too, because the aesthetic, the success and the ability of this city and the ability to live side by side in relative harmony is down in large part to our planning rules and to their enforcement. The plan we have in front of us is, as my colleague Councillor Kamali said, a fantastic, an enormous, a very thorough piece of work, but also an ambitious piece of work. It is the latest page in, or 2,000 and something pages, in the planning history book of this city, and indeed of this borough in particular. Now, most people, I think, will never read their local plan. It's unlikely to come up as a topic of conversation down the pub. But yet it does touch our lives in so many ways every single day. It's responsible in part for the success of our economy, to ensuring we have thriving high streets, for our ability to create and make the homes that we want for our families. It protects our heritage. It controls what our borough looks like, what we look at when we walk down the street every day. It's in part responsible for the environment, our ability to improve the air quality, and our ability to do our bit in tackling climate change. And then finally, it balances all these often conflicting, all noble but often conflicting goals in a way that it makes it possible for us, as I say, to live side by side and achieve each one of them. I think this plan succeeds in doing that. It's a long document. It would be unusual if I were to agree with every single policy in it. But broadly, I think officers have done a fantastic job in producing something which balances all those different competing demands and producing something fit for this borough. I don't have time, obviously, to get into too many policies, but there is just a couple that I wanted to call out very quickly. One is, which I think demonstrates the ambition of the plan, which is perhaps something you don't see in many local plans, but going beyond what any other borough or local government in this country has done in allowing people to put on double glazing and solar panels, even in listed buildings, where it doesn't impact the heritage of our borough. And I think that's a fantastic piece, a fantastic policy that has been created there. Also responding to the differing needs, the changing needs of our boroughs, identifying that some hotels, particularly in the Earls Court area, and that also extends into my ward in Redcliffe, were there for a purpose regarding the Earls Court Exhibition Centre and things which are no longer there anymore, and being able to update the plan, reflect what's needed, say actually it's homes that are more needed today, is important, and this plan has achieved that. So broadly, as I say, I'd just like to give my thanks to officers, to both the current lead member, Councillor Kamali, and his predecessor, Councillor Thelicitas, for creating this, for meeting with residents and all the councillors. I know I had several meetings with them over the various policies and really getting right into the details. And no stone has been left unturned. And I am therefore very, very proud and happy to commend this local plan to the Chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Bennett, thank you. I have the following councillors who've indicated they want to speak. Councillor Husband, Councillor Thalicites, Councillor Adurian, Councillor Wade, Councillor Idris, Councillor Rendell, Councillor Schmetterling, Councillor Hammond, Councillor Taylor-Smith, Councillor Pascal, Councillor Lowry and Councillor Bakhtiar. But if any councillor, and Councillor Will, but if there are any other councillors whose name I have not called out now, at the end you want to speak, just make sure you catch my eye. Councillor Husband, as the chairman of the Planning Committee, can I call you first, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will do my best to be brief. I very much support and welcome this plan. I think actually, right at the front of it, the overarching vision that's outlined, I think is a very good one, because it brings together an essentially contemporary point, which is about greening, green-blue future. It's described by being livable, but it really is saying the history and heritage of the borough is something that is at our very core as to the type of place that the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea is. And I think putting these two things together in what is inevitably an enormously long, complex document, I think is a great achievement, actually. I just want to comment quickly on a couple of points. Councillor Bennett has already mentioned hotels. I think that the blanket support for the retention of hotels, I think taking that away, even in quite a limited form, I think that's very good news, because there is no doubt about it. There are parts of the borough where there are hotels whose purpose has passed, and truthfully, they now have become very dilapidated buildings that people who have to live near them probably wish didn't exist. And I think having the local plan say that we can do something about that and support doing something about it is a big step forward. I just want to quickly mention tall buildings. Excuse me. The London plan, which was adopted a couple of years ago, makes reference to London boroughs actually producing maps and saying where taller buildings are acceptable. So I think it's extremely useful for all of us that the new local plan can actually put this into play, into action. Now, in reality, if reading the documents, you will see most of the sites that we have said are suitable for tall buildings, or new tall buildings, are down the western edge of the boundary, where in effect there are already nearby or have permission very tall buildings in many cases. And I think that's a useful, pragmatic way forward. And of course, the other side of that coin means that we now have a policy-based reason to resist attempts to just stick up some enormous tower somewhere in the middle of a conservation area, or somewhere where there are no tall buildings surrounding. I just very quickly want to mention a couple of other things. Site allocations. It is very important that the site allocations are up to date. And I think that is actually one of the most important parts of the document, because that is the starting point for what are often very protracted negotiations with site owners as to what kind of development can actually take place. I'd like to conclude by just saying all of this goes for examination by an inspector, and I think we have to be aware that the inspector has the power to actually completely rewrite this, to strike parts of it out, to completely rewrite elements of it. Now, I think we are lucky because of the expertise and effort, principally of officers, but to some extent all of us who are members. I think the chances of something like that happening are very small. But I think it's important that everybody is aware of that. Finally, I would like to say, clearly, Councillor Kamali said, thanks to officers who have done a massive amount of work on this. But I think we should also thank the residents, whether they've responded to an online poll or they've taken the trouble to write in, and also the amenity societies. I mean, for example, the Kensington Society have clearly, collectively put in an enormous effort to read all of these documents and then make sensible responses, some of which we've been able to accept. Others haven't fitted into the system. As I say, this system whereby everything goes to a planning inspector in the end. But that effort, I think, is something we should recognise, and I think we should thank all of those residents who have actually contributed. But I support the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Husband. Councillor Hargreaves, as one of the Deputy Chairman of the Planning Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And can I also commend this report and also thank all the officers and members of the public and councillors who contributed to it. I think as one of the Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee, it's important that when we sit on the committee, we have relevant and up-to-date policies that we can use in determining the various applications that come before us. So that's why this document is incredibly important for those of us who serve on the Planning Committee. And I'd like to say again thank you that you help to make our job easier when we have such a quality document that we can use and we can refer to. There are many areas in this report that one could speak on, but as a councillor who represents a ward, there has been continual development in a very narrow area of my ward. I'd like to say also that being able to refer to this document when we speak to developers is actually very useful and gives us some teeth in order to defend the patches that we have in our wards that are under continual development. So that is also a very useful document as well, Councillor Taylor-Smith. Again, too much to comment on in many ways, but I would also like to sort of add to how the section on green and blue and the spaces that we devote in our ward to keeping our residents healthy, keeping them an environment which they can enjoy and they can actually use. But also, I think it's important when we have these that where the council is directly responsible for investing in these areas, we take that duty seriously and we do it ourselves. If we expect other people to live by this plan, then we ought to live by it ourselves. And I know the investment that we put in, certainly in my ward, in green open spaces, in Cremorne Gardens, in Roper's Gardens, and in Embankment Gardens, where we're about to undertake a huge replanting and re-gardening exercise. And of course, I'm excited that we get a new open space at Cremorne Wharf. So I beg the council, please, to continue to do its bit where it can and where it is responsible in bringing this local plan alive. And thank you very much. I commend this plan to the Chamber. Thank you.
Councillor Dencode. Sorry, Councillor Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to focus my comments on two of the most significant sites in North Kensington listed in the plan, the Kensal Canal Side Opportunity Area and Edenham Way. In theory, the Kensal site may present significant opportunity to develop desperately needed social housing. However, from the outset, we're dealing with a number of different landowners, each with different vested interests in what they seek to achieve. The sheer scale of development and densification in the Kensal Gasworks site outlined in this local plan will produce cataclysmic impacts on housing quality, pollution, health and well-being, and cannot simply be supported by existing or planned infrastructure and transport in the local area. The plan states that the target level of delivery in Kensal Gasworks is 3,500 homes. We are also told that such high density is necessary in order to maximise social housing. The 35% affordable housing target would result in 1,225 affordable homes, of which only 858 would be social rented homes. On paper, this is shameful. However, it's actually even worse when you delve in. It's clear the council intends to build far more, up to 5,000, in order to justify an even achievable level of just 30% affordable housing. The financial strategy and commercial objectives of particular landowners, for example Ballamore, will result in pressure to produce the very lowest acceptable levels of social homes. The local plan does not seek to maximise social housing, and the council is unlikely to resist pressure from these developers in the viability process. If built according to the plan, this would be the joint tallest site in the borough, towering 98 metres. Changing attitudes towards tall buildings mean there's little appetite among local residents, or indeed more widely for residential skyscrapers, nor will they be appropriate in the area where we need to respect the sensitivity of the historic cemetery. Tall buildings are also unsustainable from an environmental and energy perspective. High-rise buildings emit double the carbon emissions of average and low-rises. Studies show that each additional story results in a 2.4% increase in electricity use and a 2.9% increase in fossil fuel use. So the provision of tall buildings is incompatible with the Council's commitment to the climate emergency and the legacy of Grenfell. Original cost estimates for remediation of toxic waste were in the range of 30 million when estimated years back. We still do not know the true figure. While remediation costs do not and must not absolve landowners of responsibility to deliver social housing, there is an outstanding concern. The affordable housing target of public-owned land is 50% as opposed to 35% on private land. However, should a public landowner, prove exceptional remediation costs, they may exempt themselves from this policy and produce the lower level of 35%. How does the Council intend to tackle this? More importantly, however, the sheer scale of development is not supported by existing or planned infrastructure. For years, this Council toyed with the folly of a Crossrail Elizabeth Line station on the site, original cost estimates for which were 30 million, but likely now to be higher. Why on earth does this local plan still infer that the station is feasible in paragraph K? On the other hand, the Gasworks SPD states otherwise. Quote, "The delivery of an Elizabeth Line station at Kensal Canal site has not yet been proven feasible. No further feasibility work is anticipated in the lifetime of the local plan." So why on earth does this iteration of the local plan state the station is feasible when the SPD states that it is not feasible? It appears that the Council is deceitful or completely incompetent. I suspect both. Further, there are no plans for a new overground station at Hive Road. The timed opening of the Old Oak Common Rail interchange has been delayed to past 2030. We're all aware that existing road connections are not viable and there are no new plans for road links at the western end of the site. The proposed cycle bridge and route outlined in the plan is based on outdated information, and no collaboration with local groups has been made to ensure that the route is sensitive or sustainable. The development would result in the creation of a wholly new council ward in the borough without any tube stations or limited TL4 presence altogether. I wish to also touch on Edenham Way and Cheltenham Estate in Golborne. Just over a year ago, we managed to, at least for the meantime, prevent the council's planned architectural vandalism and regeneration of Goldfinger's prized estate. It's now a slap in the face to residents who've already been consulted that this new plan advocates a 50-metre, 14-storey tower. A development of this scale, providing private housing in what was designed to be a cradle-to-grave council estate, contributes nothing to alleviating the deprivation of the local area and contradicts the agreed SPD with the community in 2015. The local plan must instead address the local need. The need in the Cheltenham estate and surrounding area is for improved primary care facilities, re-provision of the residential care home which was demolished, a day centre for elders, an outdoor gym, homes for social rent, employment space, an improved community and social space, and nothing above 4 stories.
Councillor Lowry, your time is up.
To conclude, for these reasons and the fact that the Council has ignored its own consultation and the legacy of Grenfell, the Labour Group opposes this iteration of the local plan.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you. The local plan sets out an agenda. It's a broad brush approach, but in some cases lacks essential detail. In the section on Earl's Court at site allocation, the issue around the heights of building on the site and how it will subsume the predominantly Victorian streetscape with a proposed up to 20 stories, as in this document, is inappropriate, out of character, and out of context. It's hard to see how, within the 15 acres within the RBKC site, dominated by a very difficult railway infrastructure, that it will be able to supply office space, cultural offer, open space and homes, and how it will succeed, how it will actually fit. I think we worked out it's 118 people per hectare in Kensington and Chelsea. I think it'll probably be more on this space. Now, the densities, and the problem with this is you're looking at the opportunity area as Earl's Court, but you're not integrating it with Earl's Court. And that is the main problem I have with this local plan. You cannot see something which is going to be interdependent without looking at it together. So the existing Earl's Court has to work with the opportunity area, or it fails. So the other comments that I have is we do want to have active travel within the borough, but we've only got 10 kilometres of quiet ways for cyclists, and I think we could do more. With the hotels, we're delivering, in some cases, units of about 17 square metres when people refurbish rather than to redevelop, and I think we should be trying to go for decent standards. Mention is made of construction traffic management plans. These are fine in principle. They sound good at planning committee and then fail because we don't have effective enforcement. It's wonderful to see stuff on odour and high-level extracts, but we fail to deal with bike deliveries and the impact of the growth of takeaways. I would like to have seen something on that. Houses of multiple occupation, they used to have more, they were protected, and we've now got larger student accommodation, which is no longer fit for purpose. I think we need to look at that separately and see what we can do in order to provide homes rather than problems. And one interesting thing that was in the plan, which says, given the pressures that many housing associations are under to meet the revised standards, how is the borough going to protect its loss of tired stock? And I think we have to look at that, because it's actually in the plan that we should be protecting, but it doesn't say how we're going to do it. It's sad not to see anything about the boats being protected on Chelsea Riverside. They're very much part of the Chelsea heritage. So I can see a lot of work's gone into this, lots of submissions. Kensington and Earls Court societies have done quite a lot of work. So it's important that we ensure that some of the refinements that are missing are considered, taken on board, and if they're not answered in this document, they must be answered going forward. It's not you might be using it in planning, but actually this document will trickle down into be used into other departments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Wade, thank you. Councillor Dorian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'd very much like to welcome the new local plan before us this evening, and I know many of us will have spent a fair few hours preparing our various responses to the drafts that the document has gone through over the past few years. I know I certainly have. Obviously, as Councillor for Earls Court, I inevitably ended up spending a fair amount of that time examining the proposals for the Earls Court development site, the Earls Court site allocation. I am very pleased that the plan sets out a number of very welcome requirements for the site, provisions for a cultural venue, community spaces, green spaces, childcare facilities, so all very, very welcome requirements. And more broadly, Earls Court more widely, in the SW5 postcode, the ability to permit some of our hotels to convert back effectively to long-term residential use will be something that will greatly increase the potential of new homes, high-quality new homes being delivered in the area. Indeed, something that Earls Court councillors highlighted last year in our call to action. Nevertheless, Mr. Mayor, I must express my concern about one aspect of the plan, which has already come up this evening, and that's the potential for tall buildings, specifically in the Earls Court development site, something beyond the Kensington and Chelsea average. Now, I do understand that this requirement is rooted in the Council's obligation to meet current government housing targets. We've heard about the compliance with the London plan, of course, and to ensure viability. Now, of course, Mr. Mayor, we all want to see new homes being built, but I believe we must be able to strike a balance between growth and development and the preservation of character and heritage. And I want to really commend the work done by Councillor Kamali and Councillor Falasitis in at least trying to deliver a fair set of policies for the site within all of these external constraints, at least stipulating a range of heights across the footprint of the site. Just to conclude, we in Earls Court, we do cherish the skyline of this part of London. We want to see development that complements our traditional architecture and urban design, and we oppose the introduction of stale and uniform townscapes devoid of the character that makes all of Kensington and Chelsea such a special place to live. We will look forward to seeing what the developers ultimately propose in their forthcoming master plan, and as ever, I trust that any planning application will be judged on its merits. Thank you.
Councillor Pascal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, first of all, to all the officers and councillors, and as particularly referenced by our leader in her introduction, the many residents and associations who made an input. We are perhaps at best custodians of our built fabric. Like many, I live in a house that was built 100 years before I was born. and it will no doubt be there at least 100 years after I have been moved on. A caution that in implementing this local plan, we make sure that it guides us to avoid the pressure of the London plan towards building too dense and too high. I think also that, as mentioned in part of the local plan, neighbourhood plans can help, although there have only been a couple so far. On the section 2, green and blue, I welcome particularly all the objectives overall, but in particular the substantial and difficult areas of improving insulation and double glazing in listed buildings. Also the offset tariff funding, which is hypothecated to climate and energy efficiency work in RBKC. Success in all these areas will depend on thorough, sensitive and detailed approvals and enforcement. Finally, I welcome the reference to overheating and air quality. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Rendell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like everyone here, I'd like to thank officers for all their time, and especially Councillors Kamali and Thalasitis for getting this over the line. I know how many hours were put into this, and I really appreciate all their work. Before I begin, Mr. Mayor, I just want to disagree with one point of Councillor Bennett. And indeed, I'm sure the local plan is a topic of conversation in the Abingdon and Britannia, if I know anything about it from Councillor Husband. So it indeed is a topic of conversation, likewise, outside of this chamber. The local plan, Mr. Mayor, I'm really pleased to see, has many local and employment economic opportunities that is critical to this borough. For example, the evening and the nighttime economy. Our theatres, restaurants, bars, clubs are critical to many jobs and a reason why our residents live here and why our visitors come. I also welcome the fact that our London plan identifies South Kensington as having a nighttime economy of international or national significance. Now, this is really important, Mr. Mayor. Nighttime economy does not mean necessarily clubs and bars. A nighttime economy means access to healthcare, access to dentistry, education, and transport. And I hope to bring our first nighttime economy strategy for this borough in due course. Also, Mr. Mayor, this plan reflects very well the plan to protect shopping. We aim to protect individual shops outside our designated town centres, which I think is, again, really important. This is really welcome. Our small back streets are the integral part of our economic success. And again, it's in part why I think our residents live here. We also have in the plan, Mr. Mayor, an integral part of protecting our pubs. Now, many people will know that many pubs have closed down in recent years, have been turned into housing or offices or anything like that. But this plan now seeks to protect those proactively and tries to retain where they are. On the last point, on Earls Court, now I'm conscious Councillor Adurian and Councillor Wade spoke of Earls Court, and I think they've done a very good job in integral success about what's in the plan. As you know, there's improvement of the local public realm of Earls Court, shopfront improvement, which I know something Councillor Wade is especially passionate about, and for the need for it to be an economic hub. I'm pleased with these councillors I mentioned and late Councillor Spalding, who was really integral to this, that we are moving forward to explore a need for a potential bid in Earls Court. And I'd like to say that the local plan completely backs that up. So in that, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to support the recommendation to support the local plan to the Chamber, and I thank everyone for their time. Thank you.
Councillor Will, I think you wanted to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And this is a bit ad hoc from me, but firstly, I want to add my thanks for this. I mean, this is just so much work in here, so thank you to all, particularly Preeti, who are involved in this. But the thing I wanted to flag, unsurprisingly, for those of you who know me, is how happy I am to see policies GB 15, 16 and 17, all of which refer to protecting and enhancing our green spaces in the borough. Specifically, we've now got an urban greening factor. We've now got a commitment of at least 10% increase in biodiversity in our big sites, and also about how we're going to protect and enhance our green spaces. And on that, it hasn't been published yet, but I wanted to show you a little bit of good news. As part of our biodiversity action plan, we did a borough-wide survey, which we hadn't done for 10 years, of all our significant spaces. And the good news is we really haven't seen a decline in them. So that is really, really encouraging. But now, with these policies, we will be able to make sure we protect them for the next 10 years or so, and more importantly, really hold developers to delivering, maintaining them, and in fact delivering new green spaces, which is something I feel very, very passionate about. Some of them have already been mentioned, Earls Court and Lots Road. And then finally, just an observation, Councillor Judd talking about Kensal earlier, Kensal Cemetery, which is a very important green space in this borough, but is not owned by the council. There's a lot of confusion. We do not own it. And therefore, sadly, although those buildings are in poor repair, they are not our responsibility. I just wanted to clarify that. And thanks again to officers and everyone for their work on this.
Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Quick change of glasses. So thank you, Mr. Mayor, and again, congratulations all round, including the officers, for the production of this local plan. And not surprisingly, I'm going to talk about Section 3, which are the homes, because this local plan protects our affordable housing and it resets the priorities we have for the delivery of affordable housing. But it also sets out the challenges we face, with more affordable housing, which is desperately needed for this council to address the large number of people on our waiting list. Now, as a council, we're already doing our part on our new Hope Homes programme, which are going to be delivering 600 homes, including a contribution from Councillor Hargreaves' ward down at Riverside. But the important part for me about this is that the local plan also ensures that the private sector is going to do its part, because it contains a commitment of a minimum of 35% of new schemes will be affordable, and 70% of those will be socially rented. It also makes an underline that these deliveries have got to be on site, and it's not going to be taking money in lieu, which I know has been something the council has done in the past. That would only be done under in exceptional circumstances. Now, we've got some very, very large sites here, and the opportunity of producing great affordable sites. And what has shocked me tonight is Councillor Lowry. I mean, Councillor, I'll use your numbers, the opportunity of having 1,250 affordable homes on Kensal, to dismiss it by saying only 800 will be socially rented. That's 40% of our waiting list. 40%. And the other 450, which you dismissed, is key worker homes. This is to allow our teachers and our nurses to live and work in the borough. And you should be ashamed to just dismiss it as saying only, because this is how we are going to address the large number of people who are sitting on our waiting list. And to get lectures about you're the only side of this chamber that cares, I find will fall on deaf ears for me in terms of that is concerned. I appreciate that these schemes are going to be controversial. But we've got to hold these developers to that commitment and ensure that we get the nominations for our residents. So really, to conclude, I welcome this local plan, and it also welcome it because it reinstates our commitment to Lots Road, and that is not just delivering high-quality homes, but it's also, crucially, delivering the 65 affordable care home units that were lost, obviously, with the sale of Thamesbrook. That was a commitment we gave to replace, and that's something we're going to do. So, Mr. Mayor, the future is exciting, and the local plan ensures that affordable housing and needs for our rents will be at its heart. And I unashamedly accept the nickname that's been given by my colleagues of Comrade Kim to fight for this. And I'm going to suggest to Councillor Lowry that maybe he adopts the moniker of Luddite Lowry. Thank you.
Councillor Burns.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I welcome the new local plan and want to thank Councillors Thelasitis and Councillor Kamali, as well as the officers, for their work in producing a strong set of policies. The aesthetic and character of buildings contribute to our sense of pride in place and help to make the borough special. In densely populated wards like Chelsea Riverside, where lots of development has taken place over recent years, it is especially important for the local plan to strike the right balance between both complementary and competing objectives. I know that the leadership team agreed a vision for the Locks Road area in November 21, which indeed sought to strike a balance between a wide variety of uses, including the area's employment zone, housing need and open space. Likewise, the Locks Road design brief was produced to help produce a scheme that works for the largest possible group. The local plan builds on that work. The employment zone is retained in policy PLV7, whilst plans for the Locks Road south side are considered in site allocation SA6. I'm particularly excited to read paragraph 2.122, which reasserts policy support for a new park and a sports use at Cremon Wharf. It has been some time since the council made this kind of commitment towards the introduction of new accessible green space in the ward, and I am confident children and young people who I'm passionate about representing as a young people's champion, working with Councillor Fox, will be excited by the prospect of a new Riverside Park. I recommend colleagues support the new local plan and look forward to working with residents to ensure policies to protect and enhance Chelsea Riverside, and in particular Lotts Village, are given due weight in the planning process, the right development and a new river park. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we now have Councillor Hammond? Could we have it on, please?
But maybe, oh, there we go. Yes, it's probably been put on from the... It probably was this time. Yes, thank you very much, my friend Councillor. May I start by declaring that I have discussed the local plan, the draft local plan in the pub in the Anglesey Arms with my friend Councillor Kamali, and may I also remind Councillor Bennett that he was actually there, and as I remember, he played a full part in the conversation about the plan. I'm very grateful, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity to speak on this, because it's one of the most important things that the council votes on over the course of the cycle. I mean, this is up there with the budget in terms of what we consider and vote on as a council. I would like to congratulate the lead member and his predecessor and the officers, and indeed the Kensington Society and the many members of the public that have contributed to this 5,000 page document. I've been following it very closely since the first draft, and I'll consider my comments in sort of three sections. And I think firstly I would say there's quite a lot of continuity between the old plan and the new plan, and nothing wrong with that, because a lot of the old plan was fit for purpose. So for example, what were previously the CL policies have been slightly updated, and they're now called the Conservation and Design, the CD. A lot of them have come straight across. They were fit for purpose, they still fit for purpose. These are the policies that keep our borough special. It's been special for over 100 years. It needs to be special and keep its conservation areas for the next 100. And I noticed things like our basement policies made an appearance in there as well. Secondly, but perhaps less positively, during the drafting phase, it did feel at times like some of this was being done to us by external forces or indeed by our officers who were responding to the government's housing targets. Now these targets are entirely artificial. What are they, about 400, 500 a year? It varies. Sorry? 448, well that was one of them, but there's been various, and it does change from year to year. But these targets are artificial, and in the context of the fact that this borough has lost around 5,000 dwellings to short-term lettings, these these artificial targets have no credibility whatsoever. It is the answer to Councillor Dent-Code's point earlier about emptying homes, short-term lettings. The GLA's report of February 2019 shows that we've lost 5,000 in this borough before the pandemic. Of course, we don't know what the current figure is. So that context does make it quite difficult to do a local plan which doesn't consider that particular point. I mean, some of the things that were done to us, I mean, amalgamations, tall buildings. I've had lots of conversations with my friend Councillor Kamali over these, and I'm grateful that he sorted out the most egregious examples of them, and he's done enough to get my vote tonight on this. But I do want to also have a third category of things which I can welcome with open arms and being very positive about, because it's a huge document. Of course, as Councillor Bennett said, we don't agree with every last sentence of it, as I've made clear. But the whole blue-green section, the blue-green future section, I mean, that's completely new. I hugely welcome that. It's, there's some really innovative stuff in there. I've already made speeches in this chamber about the listed buildings and solar panels and windows. I think the one I want to pick on tonight, though, is the circular economy. And that's strategically hugely important. This is the reuse of... I'm not giving way just yet, Councillor Jadot, so I'll just finish what I'm saying. If you want to intervene on me in a moment, you may. The circular economy, the principle of reusing buildings that are already there as the first port of call, if that had been in place 5 years ago, the developers that were trying to desecrate South Kensington would not have been able to propose pulling down a perfectly serviceable Victorian building in Thurlow Street, because it's reusable. So that's a huge step forward in this local plan, and I hugely welcome it. So overall, fantastic effort by the council's team, by the lead member, and you've got my vote tonight. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Jeddah, did you want to say anything?
Thank you so much. Obviously, as a councillor for Dalgano, I walk my area nearly on a weekly basis. I walk along the canals, and if you really bothered yourself to have this walk, you can see that the bridge, it's impossible. There are boats there with permanent addresses, and there is a wideness. And I went to Anglican chapel with the catacombs, and I saw between one grave and another, there is no way you can have a bridge. So your plan, it's done on paper, on computer, far away from reality of Dalgano. Congratulations, this shows exactly what you are. Unprofessional, superficial, and my residents are hurting. Because Kensal House, as the lady came, it's a listed second grade. You should be doing the work, changing windows like a Tedrick Tower long time ago. It's called management decline, declining management. So just to go to your plan. First of all, the bridge cannot be there because obviously locality is not really for your cycling. There is literally boats with permanent addresses. Obviously you haven't made the site visit. Thank you very much. In regards to cemetery, yes, indeed, it is a great one. It is listed. It is owned by a private company, but the same Opera Holland part has a private identity. Tell me how different these two issues are from each other. You can pull £5 million towards little project, and you cannot pull a little bit more towards our heritage. You know why? Because you are promising that you will compensate. You are waiting for this chapel to fall apart, saying, you know what, you allowed us that bridge, despite it's a great one, we give you compensation. It's immoral what you do. It's against the heritage. I spoke with friends of this cemetery. They are absolutely appalled. So excuse me, but your plan is not reflecting what is in reality. If you cannot make yourself available in Dalgano, I am more than happy to find someone who can really walk you through a WhatsApp group, Zoom, and show you that canal cannot have cycling away, like you say can. Your proposal is 31 tall building. You want to stack people there like little sardines without thinking where these people supposed to live, in what ways through the roof, what exactly do you want to achieve there? First of all, there will be no underground, so they can't told you plain and clear, you have no money. So this plan, please just take it, review, come to Dalgano, see with yourself, with someone else. It's literally unprofessional and you are embarrassing yourself. Another issue is, I think, you have to understand that project is vast. It belongs between Hammersmith and Fulham and Kensington and Chelsea. You need to see it from a different perspective and different angles. There is also contamination of the land. I cannot see really much talking about that. We have already Grenfell Tower and dealing with firefighters who have leukemia. So what will we find there when you do the digging? What about the proper assessment for flooding? It's sitting on a clay. Where is that assessment? You haven't even done that. So do you know what is happening in Dalgano? If you have time, please welcome, I give you a tour around, but do not embarrass yourself. It's literally embarrassment. Thank you.
I was going to ask Councillor Bakhtiar, but if you want to go now, Councillor Dent-Code, you may.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just putting on my timer. We've lost our timer on the camera, haven't we? On the screen, which is a bit frustrating. Okay, thank you. Thanks very much. I wanted to follow on from Councillor Jedit because she was making some very good points, but I'm going to address the issues that I had responded to in a Labour group response to the local plan. The world has changed, and some of this is going to be very hard to realise. And we do have a lot of issues, and I'm glad that as far as government's concerned, planning has gone up the agenda. We've had some absolutely appalling secretaries of state in the past few years, but we have somebody who at least understands that. So as I say, the world has changed, but also the demographics of the borough have changed. You know, as I said earlier, we have cohorts of people, of older people getting, there's one cohort which is much larger of people of my age actually, and we're going to be very short of young people over the years. Are we actually accommodating that? You know, while the house prices are in free fall here specifically, who is going to invest in these massive developments? And I find all that very concerning. And meanwhile, obviously, we know about the rising costs of retrofit. We're putting new BVC windows in all our estates, and that's going to be, we're going to regret that in years to come, I'm sure. As far as air pollution is concerned, we have, as always, the most beautiful policies, but we don't implement them properly. There is no post-occupation monitoring of the works using some kind of standardised system, and over a quarter of buildings, around a quarter of buildings, don't live up to their environmental standards, and we really have to watch what we're saying and doing, because much of it is fluff, I'm sorry to say. So looking at very specific issues, we were talking about noise earlier and how it affects physical and mental health. So we have to make better, more solid homes. And some of the ones, for example, in Warnington Green, they can almost hear people breathing in the next flat. Flooding, we've had terrible floods in North Ken, and there's virtually no monitoring or implementation again of SUD systems. And the ones which are planned are going to make no difference at all to what happened in Portobello Road or indeed around Counters Creek. And the cement paving or paving to the front of people's gardens and this ghastly plastic grass in the back is not helping. We don't seem to have any rules. Some councils have rules about plastic grass. And it also affects biodiversity. So I'm very happy to hear that we aren't losing biodiversity. But the number of people paving their front gardens and putting plastic in the back gardens is not helping at all. New developments, sewers, the Latimer Road residents are very worried about any upcoming development because some of them still have sewage in their basements from the floods, was it last year? Before? No, last year. And that's absolutely disgusting, and the Victorian sewers are a breaking point. There's also concerns about the size of homes, and we really have to look at the census returns because this is a whole lifetime of need here, which is changing. We do need more family-sized, affordable homes. We're hearing about a lovely St Helens, but we need more of those to keep those people in the borough because they're moving out, and that is all proved in the census. And also, obviously, older people who may need sheltered homes and care homes. So, you know, as far as conservation is concerned, there are some things we're very, very good at and some things we fail spectacularly. I'm thinking of the Coronet Cinema. We really have to implement our own policies. We've heard a lot about tall buildings. I'm not a fan of tall buildings unless they're Trellick Tower. I think we're done with that. I'm a huge fan of a mid-rise, and we've heard a lot from what Councillor Lowry was saying about the environmental impact of tall buildings. We really have to move away. There are high-density mid and low-rise, which will also house an awful lot of people. We want to be green, inclusive and livable, and I don't know how we can be inclusive when our transport is not. We are the most bicycle-unfriendly borough in London, as far as I can see. Our streets are jammed with cars in North Cairn. It's really frightening. And as I said earlier, I'm afraid to use my bike around there. We need to get people on the bus, and we need to have more accessible stations. This is our watching brief on specific things. Obviously, we heard about Kensal and a lot of concerns about that. Latimer Road, I'm being approached, and so is Councillor Lowry, almost daily about concerns there. Lots Road, we're going to keep an eye on that.
Code, you've had 5 minutes.
I've got 3 seconds, thank you. Portobello Road, we do not want architects and designers spending tens of millions on that. And of course, Earls Court, we really, really need to have proper
15
integrated
seconds,
neighbourhood and not something that will suck energy and money.
Councillor Dencode, 3 seconds. No, actually 20 seconds. Councillor Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The only thing I want to talk about this is, after Grenfell, the key thing we have all agreed on is consultation, taking people's views. And the consultation had happened during COVID restrictions, which was very, very difficult for so many of our residents to contribute and participate and give good feedback. And if you talk about the real figures, those who were consulted and gave feedback were only in hundreds. Yesterday alone, we had nearly 100 angry residents only at Colville. They didn't know anything about the proposal and the council plans. So I think consultation wasn't conducted fairly. Thank you.
Councillor Bakhtiar, thank you. Councillor Idris, followed by Councillor Schmetterling.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And on a very much lighter note, I would like to echo my thanks to Councillor Talasisis and Kamali and officers and all the people who contributed to this plan. I am delighted to welcome Brompton Cross Vision at PLV3. This is a special place in my ward, which can be enhanced by investment in public realm, as paragraph 9.76 notes. It is therefore exciting that plans to improve Draker Avenue, including feature paving and new pollinator-friendly trees, have been approved. The proposed plans are very popular by residents and won more than 80% support in those consulted last year. I therefore, Mr. Mayor, would like to take this opportunity again to thank Councillor Thelesisis and Kamali and the landowners for the vision and the collaborative work it took to secure this project. I am also very proud that the new local plan review, as drafted in October 2022, supports biodiversity in policy GB17. There is explicit reference to the role of the Biodiversity Action Plan in paragraph 2.3. In the past 5 years, we have grown and nurtured the B Superhighway. Of course, I'm not going to let any meeting get away without me mentioning the B Superhighway at least once. The B Superhighway network in Kensington and Chelsea. As you know, Mayor, the B Superhighway, as I said, and all things pollinator are very, very special to me. So it's welcome news. The new policies mean those gains can be preserved and built upon. both on council and commercial applications. This is a great opportunity to leave a rich and transformative legacy in the borough. Here also, I would like to thank two people, Leanne Bursland, who oversaw the inception of the B Superhighway, and Alice Lowton, who took over from her and is doing a splendid job. Thank you.
Councillor Schmetterling, please.
Just got to find the right page. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I should like to join the chorus of approval in thanking the lead members, any other councillors and other planning officers for their work producing the new local plan. Excuse me, as you can hear, I'm losing my voice. Maybe that's a good thing. It looks mostly very good, and a lot of work has gone into it. And thanks to all the residents who responded to the consultation. It addresses so many important topics. For me, housing is one of the top ones. Page 76 of the plan, which reminds us that there are almost 3,100 households on the housing register, of which about 2,100 are in temporary accommodation. At least there seems to be a decrease, albeit pretty small, in the housing register when I first looked over 4 years ago. So it is good that new homes are being built, presently mostly in North Kensington. As regards my ward, Pembridge, I'm pleased to see it gets an honourable mention. Notting Hill Gate, mind you, Camden benefits too. Policy PLV 10 on page 208 has a very positive vision for the area, preserving and enhancing the distinctive cultural identity of the road, promoting improvements in the streetscape. There's a consultation program on now. We have a great, bustling, vibrant area, but we do have problems with graffiti and litter. But I'm glad that there's been a substantial action to remove graffiti, making a big difference to places like Pembridge Road. Now we just have to maintain this. I know that this initiative will extend to other hard-hit wards like Colville next door. Refurbishment to the nearby landmark in the Pembridge Conservation Area, Turquoise Island, has also helped. And I'm now hopeful that policy support to improve the attractiveness and walkability of the centre through investments in public realm and greening infrastructure, paragraph 9.62, will give local decision makers the tools to continue that important work. I can carry on saying good things about the area formerly in Pembridge, Westbourne Grove, but I'd better leave that to the Colville councillors. Also just outside Pembridge, in Camden, is Newcombe House. I'm very pleased to see that the medical centre there, to which planning permission has been given, and its area, the floor area, is specifically listed, policy SA 10 on page 265 of the plan. I should like to conclude by once again thanking everyone involved in producing it, and I commend its adoption. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to underscore the comments of Councillor Bakhtiar in regards to consultation. I note that several of the councillors who've spoken seem to be under the impression that this plan has been widely consulted, and that includes Councillor Kamali. Looking at page 11 here, I'm seeing that in a borough of 156,000 people, we have 1,480 unique individuals responding to the initial consultations. And on the latter consultation, as Councillor Bakhtiar said, although the consultation page was clicked 23,000 times, we have only 100 detailed responses, and those include from other partner stakeholders, from Savills, investment, and so forth. So it isn't exactly clear how many of those 100 are actually residents or representing residents. Now, even if it was 100%, and that's 100 residents out of 156,000. Now, this must be seen in the context of the commitments that this council has made post-Grenfell in terms of consultation. We have understood the importance of this document for our wards and for our daily life and for our residents for the next 20 years. So on a document of this significance, shouldn't the consultation have been somewhat better? And shouldn't the lead member and other members opposite be rather more aware and circumspect when they're saying this has been widely consulted? Because I don't call that wide. And as Councillor Bakhtiar has said, many residents are entirely unaware that this is happening to them. And I say to them, this is something the Council is doing to residents.
Councillor Aretti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, may I thank my friend Councillor Bennett for bringing some history here. Councillor Bennett, I know you read some history, but I was the one who witnessed history, because the guy who was fined for the chimney was none other than me in my past life in 1200. So I witnessed history more than you, Councillor Bennett, but thanks for bringing some history in. Mr. Mayor, I wholeheartedly support this local plan, and especially policy GB1, sustainable retrofitting. I very much suffered from insomnia a couple of years ago because of the noise. And with this policy, there are many buildings that could have double glazed windows which would stop noise coming from outside, and it helps. Especially, I'm quite passionate about baby sleeps, and it reminds me that I spoke last year in a motion about infant babies being woken up by supercars on Holland Road. So some of the buildings should definitely benefit from this policy. And there's many things I can go on about, and history about my historic history in 1200s, but I think I would commend Councillor Kamali, my fellow friend Councillor Thalasitis, for the work, especially the officers who has done a fantastic work. Thank you.
Councillor Folkes.
Hello. I'd just like to take this opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to actually correct some of the misinformation that is being talked about on by the other party to do with the consultation on the Portobello market. I actually undertook that consultation for 2 years, and I can just actually read out some of the things, so I've got the list of all of them. I did, it was during COVID, so I did quite a numerous number of online consultations, which of course are very different to filling in a form. These were people actually speaking online with officers, writing down the points that they felt. So I had we had one-to-one interviews that were undertaken by our consultants. And these were undertaken with residents' associations, traders, online focus groups, retailers, and it was extraordinary to me that the councillors who were there, and I know Councillor Monica Best, who was actually very good and was part of this consultation, an excellently good part of the consultation, did tell a lot of people in Colville about it. So I think it's actually disingenuous to say that this wasn't consulted on. In fact, compared to most of our consultations, we had a huge number of responses, and they were very positive, and they were reflected in all the actions that are listed in it,
carry
which
on.
are incredibly...
Councillor Folkes, carry on.
Which are incredibly
Councillor
positive.
Folkes, carry on.
And I would like the party opposite to actually read what is in the markets plan, because the markets plan are really great things to do with the market. They're things like, you know, extra stalls for young people to come and do working on, stalls for charities to be able to speak to people. Excuse me,
Councillor, would you sit down?
I actually undertook the consultations.
Councillor Folkes, can I just say, Councillor Simmons, I did ask Councillor Folkes to continue.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would just like to, before this is dismissed with no consultation, before you challenge it, read the market plan and come back, and I'd really appreciate this, and I know Councillor Kamali and Councillor Rendwood, read it, come back and tell us what you don't like in it. And that would be a really helpful thing. Thank you.
No, I want to go. We've spent a long time on this. I want to ask Councillor Thalasites and then Councillor Kamali to sum up. Councillor Lara, you've already spoken. Then the best place for misinterpretations to be clarified is probably not in this chamber, if they're detailed. I'm sure that Councillor Thalasites and Councillor Kamali can deal with that when they speak now. Councillor Thalasites. Councillor Thalasites, would you please speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May I start by welcoming the new local plan and paying tribute to my successor, Councillor Kamali, and also to the officers who played such a big part, Sue Harris, Amanda Reid, Jonathan Wade, Prissy Galagi, Chris Turner and others, for their hard work on a robust set of policies for the future. I also want to thank previous speakers for many of their kind words. Mr. Mayor, after the Grenfell fire, the Council promised to change and to put communities at the heart of the planning process. We have adopted a new statement of community involvement, renewing our contract with residents, businesses and developers, and modernised the way that we work with our communities. Since then, we've probably undertaken one of the biggest democratic exercises on a local plan anywhere in the country. Over the course of several statutory consultations, we engaged with over probably 100,000 people who saw advertisements online, who took part in online polls. We heard over 1,000 people did that. We also held meetings with amenity societies and residents associations, and we even went to the Abingdon. So not only has that been the right thing to do, but it has also unlocked democratic consent for many of the major changes in the document. We have adopted a community housing SPD that is enshrined here. We're continuing with 70% of affordable homes as social rent. We're calling them community homes still. And that is a big change that has come about after the Grenfell tragedy that is designed to respond to the needs of communities all over the borough and people of all backgrounds. And the new local plan goes further still. It's both a spatial expression of some of the culture change that we've undergone, as well as part of how we can become the best council for a borough that's greener, safer and fairer. The policies in the plan respond directly to what we've heard from residents, business and landowners over the course of the consultation and to the needs of people from all corners of the borough. They fuse the traditional preferences of residents with the technologies of the future, 18th century buildings and 21st century technologies in many cases. And residents will be relieved, for example, to see policy CD2, which requires all development to meet the highest standards of urban design, and CD3, which requires development to preserve or enhance the character of our conservation areas. Businesses should note that policy BC1 protects our employment zones, and there are also further policies to promote commercial centres. Whilst I think landowners should recognise the pragmatic approach taken to housing delivery on site allocations right across the borough, and particularly in the west of the borough, as James has said. If you live in the north of the borough, there are policies that should be directly relevant to you. For example, reaffirming the policies in the Latimer Road Design Code that we've already adopted. If you live in the middle of the borough or represent it, as I do in Holland, there are policies to promote Kensington High Street as the civic heart of the borough, and that's preserved. While if you live in the south of the borough, you should be excited by the prospect of new riverside open space, and hopefully even a sports use in paragraph 2.122, as Councillor Burns has said. There are successful existing policies like that for basements, which has been noted and are retained, but there are also exciting new policies. For example, there's policy support for sensitive retrofitting, work underway to promote solar panels and double glazing in listed buildings, which are both the first of their kind anywhere in the planning system in the country. And there is a nod to local context, like the removal of protection for hotels in SW5, which, as has been said, the late Councillor Spalding supported. So, Mr. Mayor, in closing, I want to recommend that colleagues vote to approve the local plan tonight and toast its success and how far we have come by visiting our alfresco centres, which too have support in policy TC3 as they go on enhancing the borough as a destination.
Thank you, Councillor Thalasites. I now call on Councillor Kamali to respond to any points made in the debate for up to 5 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, I had started trying to note down what everybody was saying, but I confess I not only ran out of paper, I ran out of the ability to fit it all in my own summation. I think it's interesting to hear the difference from both sides of the chamber. On our side, we have sort of a broad acceptance that this plan is about large policies that will set the style for Kensington and Chelsea for the decades to come. The other side of the chamber talk merely in sort of slogans, social cleansing on a site which is home to gasworks. I simply don't understand how that works. Actually, it's quite refreshing to hear from the other side so much broad support for some of the current Secretary of State's policies. Plastic gardens, I agree with, we shouldn't be supporting. Other areas around sort of flood mitigation, absolutely, and I welcome their support in tackling flooding on Portobello Road. We also talked about consultation, or as was accused, the lack thereof. I can't think of a day where I didn't open my phone and saw a link to the local plan. It was absolutely everywhere, and certainly was in the pubs with some of our members as well. This is a plan that you've heard tonight has been supported by this chamber. We need to now implement, get the inspector to sign it off, and let us get on with making these homes in Kensington and Chelsea fit for the years to come. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Kamali. I now put the proposal to submit the local plan to the vote. Would those for the proposal please show? Would those against the proposal please show? Are there any abstentions? I therefore declare the proposal carried. I think it can be noted that the Labour group voted against and that Councillor Wade abstained. Councillor Kamali?
Around individual applications. I think that should be noted that when they do come forward, if they do, that the Labour group perhaps shouldn't be able to sit on them because it is, I would say, prejudicial.
I think that's not for me. That would be for the Standards Committee. Reports from the leadership team. Item 10. I now invite Councillor Campbell to propose the reception of the report and Councillor Taylor-Smith to second.
I'd like to propose the report.
And I'm pleased to second.
Councillor Campbell?
Yeah, can I just speak really briefly? I just want to pay tribute to my colleague, Councillor Folkes here. Not only did she do a sterling job with consultation on Portobello Road, but here she is as lead member for Family and Children's Services. She suggested the decision to approve £243,000 to schools. So she found the money from reserves. She's talked to the head teachers as how to best support children and families during this cost of living crisis, and also for her getting it done so quickly. She has been an absolute tour de force, and schools urgently need access to the funding so they can support their students. So I just want to say tribute to Catherine Folkes. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak to that issue? Is the report noted? Thank you. Item 11, report of the Administration Committee, the adoption of the revised Councillor Officer Protocol. I call on Councillor Campbell to propose the reception of the report.
I'd like
Councillor
to propose.
Thalasitis to second.
I beg to second.
Councillor Campbell, would you like to speak to the report?
No.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does the Council agree to the recommendation set out in section 4 of the report? Good. Item 12, matters referred to the Council by scrutiny committees. There are none. Questions asked of lead members, item 13. I've been notified of 3 questions to a lead member. I now invite Councillor Wade to ask a question to Councillor Kamali and Taylor-Smith.
What actions has the Deputy Lead Member taken to enhance the environmental health team dealing with housing complaints to enable the Council to be able to respond swiftly and effectively to residents' complaints about mould and poor housing conditions across tenure, in the light of the tragic death of sorry, I'm going to cough, this shark.
Councillors Kamali and Taylor-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will respond. So thank you, Linda. So like you, we were all shocked to read the heartbreaking story of our Abhishek and his death in Rochdale as a result of severe respiratory condition caused by prolonged exposure to mould. So this is an appalling tragedy, and it's certainly something that shouldn't be happening in 21st century Britain. So for anybody involved in social housing, this is a devastating reminder of the responsibility that we hold for our tenants and the importance of us providing a safe and decent home to them. And it's a responsibility that I take very, very seriously, and it's been a driving vision for me since my appointment in 2017. But this requires not just action from councils, but it's important to say that this also includes registered providers, it also includes private landlords, and importantly also the government. So in answer to your question, what are the council doing to address this? Well, housing management are responding to every complaint to damp and mould, and this tragic death actually responded with 100 notifications that we then automatically logged and then addressed. So it's very important for us to take urgent remedial action, and we're doing this in a slightly different way. It's not sending a contractor around to have a look at it, but it's actually in preference to doing that. It's now triaging cases and allocating a dedicated surveyor to go to the property and work out exactly what the issue is and what the solution is, and to work with the resident in determining that. So it's a question of how to find cure for and prevention, ensuring that the problem is not going to go back and be repeated. The second point is to reduce the issue of penetrating damp, and we have a programme of planned maintenance to deal with that and maintaining things, including, I referred to as Kensal House, regular drainage, store clearance, and then from January 23 we'll also include the gutters and the rainwater goods as well as part of that preventative maintenance. So we're also reviewing our digital offer. I mean, this gives people the ability to notify repairs and to review and report things online to speed up that process. And in the longer term, we have our capital programme, which is 400 million we're spending on the improvement of our council homes. And this, again, should address a lot of the issues and causes of preventative maintenance and mould. So our new homes will be made to a more modern standard, and obviously that's something which then should eliminate the issue in terms of mould. So private rental accommodation, just looking at that, the responsibility lies with the private landlord, and our powers are limited in that regard. So we're working with London councils on a wide level to spread awareness about this, about prevention and early intervention. The government's taking their own action in terms of naming and shaming some of the bad landlords and councils. And we're also taking action with our own environmental health team. And we have a system in place to respond to service requests, which again we triage based upon priority and the need and vulnerability of the resident. So service users were ready to contact within 2 days of making contact with us. Again, inspections can result in either a formal enforcement action or informal activity where the landlord is not willing to work for us. We need to be tough on this. And our private housing team have now increased the numbers through a recent recruitment programme, and also plans in place where we can increase the team who are dealing with the additional HMO licensing. And that HMO licensing will enable us to proactively regulate over 3,500 multiple occupied properties in this borough. And this will also result in the identification of the damp and mould hazards at an early stage, for better health comes for our residents and occupying tenants. And finally, it's a call to all councillors here in your wards, is to encourage you, if you receive any information or aware of any of the information of damp and mould, raise this with officers at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
Councillor Wade, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. What safeguard checks on properties, private landlord or RSL, do the council take prior to nomination of residents, people that they have a duty of care, either from the housing or temporary accommodation list, to ensure that properties are safe, secure and compliant?
Thank you, Mr. Greer. The short answer is that on temporary accommodation, all temporary accommodation now we have a policy of inspecting before people move in, and also we have an annual review process. With regard to the registered providers inspecting on nominations, I'm not aware that there is an inspection that takes place. I mean, we do rely on resident providers, you know, supposedly reputable organisations, that they would do those checks before we move in. But I will check that and then confirm it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade and Councillor Taylor-Smith. I now invite Councillor Graham to ask a question of Councillor Thalasites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To ask the lead member for Finance to comment on the Mayor of London's planned 10% tax hike and how this council is working hard to keep taxes low, particularly given neighbouring Hammersmith and Fulham is raising council tax by 5%. Thank you.
Can we give time to and listen to Councillor Thalasites, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Graham, for your question. I'm sure I share your horror at the planned tax hikes coming from London Labour. It's the same old Labour, tax and spend, a 10% increase of the mayoral precept and a 5% increase in Hammersmith and Fulham. I confess that although I wear glasses, I thought I perhaps needed to check my prescription when I saw the Labour tax rises in the newspapers, which is where I first heard about them. And I hope very much that next year they will recant from this raid on people's savings and on their incomes. Here in Kensington and Chelsea, we want to keep taxes and fees low. We're fighting tooth and nail to do that against all comers and making sure that our rates are fair for those who most need it, those who are most vulnerable. Yeah.
Councillor Graham, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
In that case, I now invite Councillor Simmons to ask a question to Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Thank you very much. Before I begin, just so that there are no misunderstandings this time, I would like to clarify for Councillor Taylor-Smith. I am aware that the issue I'm about to raise affects other leaseholders elsewhere in Nottingdale than Silchester Estate, and also beyond Nottingdale indeed. So my question is, in view of the last 40 years of neglect of Silchester Estate by RBKC and the threat of regeneration inflicted upon residents, will the lead member A, please meet with the Westway leaseholders group, and B, apply a discretionary reduction or cap on the cost to leaseholders of the proposed £38 million major works to these buildings? It is not acceptable or reasonable in these or any circumstances for this council to impose either a bill or potentially a lifelong debt of £100,000 or more each upon these leaseholders, many of whom are pensioners. And I hope that the lead member in his response will consider and give his consideration to all leaseholders in the borough.
Councillor Taylor-Smith, please.
Thank you, Councillor Simmons. And yes, of course, I will very happy to travel and meet with the Westway Leaseholders Group. As I say, I'm quite famous for taking my Vespa to North Kensington. I think, in answer to your question, I mean, the Council is obviously committed to ensure that all homes are safe, and this is the heart of our commitment on the refurbishment programme on our stock. But the simple fact is that this is a programme that needs to be financed, and the recovery of costs is not only a legal obligation of this council, but it also underpins the financing of our programme. So Silchester Estate includes some very high-rise concrete blocks that were constructed in the late 60s, early 70s, and the concrete structures are incredibly expensive to maintain. And under the previous administration, these buildings were scheduled for regeneration because of that attendant cost. But following the Grenfell tragedy, I made a commitment that we would no longer pursue a regeneration scheme. This was done in this council chamber unless the majority of residents agreed and thought that that was the best course of action. And that, I believe, is the right decision. It's a decision we'll stick with. But that doesn't mean that we can stand still and not carry on. So in consultation with our residents, we plan major refurbishment of the estate, Silchester and the wider estates. However, we must expect that this is extremely expensive. I mean, £46 million on that estate is not a decision that we take lightly, particularly when you compare that with the annual income in the housing revenue account of only 50 million. So we have a duty to the 285 tenants and the 35 leaseholders that live on that estate to provide decent homes. So we've got to accept that the leaseholders in those plots are going to be facing very high bills for this work, and this is true of all of our estates in different degrees throughout the borough. And we've engaged extensively with those leaseholders throughout this process, and ensuring that the bills that they receive do not come as a surprise. And costs are particularly acute for the 11 leaseholders that live in those tower blocks, whereas you have indicated the charge will be quite high. So we've looked at how we can ameliorate that, and we've looked at that in terms of doing long-term payment plans without interest costs to spread the cost, and that reflects effectively what has been absent from our programme, which is a sinking fund. I think these bills wouldn't have been, if there'd been a policy of sinking fund for many years, we would have built up the reserves, but we have to live with that. And we're also looking at buyback options for where if they feel they're stuck in, that we can step forward. So, and I know that officers have met with the affected leaseholders on a number of times. It's not a surprise for them. And as I say, I'm very happy to meet the Westway Group. So it's just not an option for this council to waive our obligation to recover monies. And, you know, and I must remind you, as I did with Councillor Lari on the windows at Swinbrook, this money comes from the pockets of our residents. It comes from the HRA. It doesn't come from the council. And we are really concerned about the level of rent increases and the impact of utilities that our residents are facing. So we have to be very careful on dispensing caps, although I can understand, you know, why that's been a request. And, you know, we look at the escapes, we look at Henry Dickens in your ward and, as well. They're going to all, again, be subject to this, and all the other 2,500 leaseholders we're talking about. So making an exception and introducing a cap, I think, could very well put a question on the viability of our HRA and risk the impact on our tenants' homes across the borough. Thank you.
Councillor Simmons, do you have a supplementary question you'd like to ask?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I would just actually like to make a few brief comments, and thank you very much to the lead member for his detailed response. In regards to the cost of the works, I was in fact corrected at the Scrutiny Committee the other night for quoting the £46 million figure that Councillor Taylor-Smith has just mentioned, because that is the one inclusive of VAT. So that is why I have used the £38 million figure, which I think is the one that applies. So let's make sure we're clear about that. When I wrote it, it's been corrected. Thank you.
Could we have the question?
I also would just like to note that £100,000 bills landing on leaseholders' doorsteps with the option of a forced loan is the sort of behaviour that we have seen from central government in the cladding scandal, and I don't think it's really appropriate to be having it in the Grenfell Council right now. As you know, many of the leaseholders are on limited incomes, are pensioners, and would have a lifetime of debt with this £100,000. And I just quickly would like to say that the residents of North Kensington in particular, and especially in the Grenfell ward, should not be used as cash cows to make up for the failings and the decisions of previous leadership teams, which they have had to live with the negative consequences of for years. Thank you very much.
Councillor Taylor-Smith to respond, please.
To use the word cash cow is just ridiculous, Claire. I mean, you know, these are large bills, and as I say, we have a legal obligation to do it. And much as though, and I'll look forward to seeing the Labour budget, shadow budget, that incorporates this largesse that you're showing today in terms of all our leaseholders. I accept we're not forcing loans on people, we are giving people options, and those options would include interest-free loans for a 10-year payment, which will spread the cost of it. And I say it won't be the case in terms of these sort of high bills that we're seeing in Silchester are generally not going to be the level that we're going to see elsewhere. It is quite unique to the large concrete tower blocks because they're incredibly expensive to maintain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor-Smith. Item 14. Does any member wish to raise a matter under Standing Order 11 and speak for up to 2 minutes? I've received notification from Councillor Noor. So if you'd like to speak now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to raise an issue in my ward, Golbon. this is an area, and St. Evans Road. There's a junction between St. Evans Road to Acklam Road when you are going to either Almanar or the new development is going now. So this is the opposite of the railway gate. As we know, it's one of the most polluted points in the borough. There's a constant issue of individuals and traders dumping rubbish in that spot. We raised with the relevant council officers. They really have a hard time to find out who is responsible exactly. The land is owned by the council, but it leads to Barrington Development Trust, who also sublease to other smaller business like a small bakery. I mean, I want to urge the lead member who's responsible for that area to turn that area into kind of green area where people are safe to walk, proper lighting, security cameras, and that will help also the new property being built in front of Almanar, where people can feel safe. And I think that's a way forward for our aim in this borough being a greener, a safer, and fairer borough, and also become one of the best council in the country, hopefully. So can I just urge the lead member concerned to do an immediate action as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noor. You will get a written response from the relevant lead member in due time. Councillor Lari, what do you want to say? Is it pertinent to this or something else?
It's SO11.
Sorry?
It's SO11.
You're wanting to speak, are you? I think the protocol is one Labour and two Conservative. So the answer is next time. Can we now move over to motions? There are 5 motions. Realistically, I can see that we're only going to finish one. And I'm actually going to hand over to the Deputy Mayor for that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. The first motion is on the subject of recognition for residents' associations and amenity societies. I call on Councillor North formally to move the motion, standing in his name, and Councillor Gardner to second, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Deputy Mayor, I beg to move this motion.
Thank you, sir.
I now invite Councillor North to speak up to 5 minutes. And I have my stopwatch going.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, members of the Council, and also members of the public. Just before I outline my motion, I would also like to briefly update members with some positive steps and progress that we have made from my last motion last year on tackling graffiti. I would like to thank the lead member, council officers, Councillor Hamish Adourian of Earls Court, and all the ward councillors that have shown a keen interest to tackle graffiti in some of our wards. We have reduced some of the red tape, we have doubled our graffiti removal team, and I'm pleased to say many of my colleagues have reported real progress in areas, and I can report tonight that over 500 reports of graffiti have now been removed. So we've made a difference from Chelsea to Earls Court and in my own ward of Camden. Towards the end of last year, we also held a joint meeting and a walkabout with the councillors from Pembridge and with Camden, and along with the lead member and the sewage contractors. We listened to local residents and local business, and I'm pleased to say here too we're able to agree improvements on the streetscape of Notting Hill Gate and Kensington Church Street. So thank you, colleagues, for this progress. So, Madam Deputy Mayor, today I am also pleased to propose a motion which I feel strongly about and I hope will gain support from across the Chamber and all parties as we unite to recognise and better support our over 300 residents' associations in Kensington and Chelsea. And in our shared aim to be that best council, and with our first core value of putting communities first, I believe that recognition and support that we give to our valued residents groups is a key performance indicator towards that aim. In speaking with officers that work with our communities and residents groups, I have been encouraged by some of the amazing work that we already do as a borough to reach out and engage with residents and volunteer groups. Whether it be by regular newsletters, citizens panels, residents association or volunteer groups, it's a great deal of time and resources that are given by the way in which RBKC seeks to listen and to support our communities. So I thank the communities team for that work. So what can RBKC do to be that best borough, and what more can we do? The council prides itself in offering not just good services to our residents, but we also strive for value for money. So I discussed with the communities team a 7-point action plan to better communicate and support. Conscious and mindful of the department budgets and that favourite buzz phrase at the moment to fit within the funding envelope, I hope that this will be considered as part of the plan for ahead. RBKC, I believe, were the leaders in London some years ago with its Gold Standard Award for residents groups. I hope that as part of this proposal, it can be considered. I think it would give a simple set of standards, support and recognition that indeed would ensure RBKC is the best borough and how we value our residents groups. I have also reassured the department that they can rely on the help from all ward councillors to help them in keeping their information up to date with our ear on the ground and knowledge of local ward groups. Last year, during the summer, various community and jubilee events showed how wonderful our communities and residents got together. In May this year, we will be celebrating a coronation, something we last did 70 years ago in 1953. What better time to invest in our communities and reintroduce the Gold Standard Award and show London how RBKC values its residents group. Let our Mayor host an event that will share the recognition, inviting all residents groups to the Town Hall in 2023. An event to share and support each other in starting and building the structure of residents' associations, volunteer groups from North Kensington to Chelsea. In conclusion, and on a really practical local level, in my own ward of Camden, Councillor Foulkes, Councillor Hudd and myself have recently been working with some blocks that have had some difficulties of late. Together we have solved some of these difficulties, so tonight I would just like to finish by adding a very warm welcome to two of the newest residents groups to our list, Johnson House Residents Association and Camden Houses Residents Association, and as of today, Tor Court Residents Association. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner, do you wish to speak at this point?
Yes, thank you. Madam Deputy Mayor, I first got involved in local life in Kensington Chelsea by picking up the pieces of a dispute between my new neighbours and the builders of our homes. And with some coaxing, I got my neighbours together, and first informally and then more formally, to form an active residents' association. Too often, residents' associations operate in silos, when in fact they have so much to share. Best practice, how to grow their membership, influence council policy, and run a successful campaign. The introduction of the gold standard can help recognise residents' associations and bring them together so they can learn from each other. Residents' associations, like my own, often come about due to a common battle and then take on a life of their own. The Pembridge Association in my ward held its first meeting in October 1972. The Ladbroke Association in 1969, and the Kensington Society was formed in 1953. They have all done tremendous work and inspired smaller residents' associations to form and flourish. And I know how key the residents' associations and amenity societies are in helping our city living local life ward projects come to fruition, both with the ideas and with helping with the funding. One of the first things I did, or I was given when I was elected a councillor some years ago, was a fellow councillor's handwritten guide to setting up a residents' association.
As Councillor North just mentioned, we as councillors can play a very active role in helping residents come together to form a residents' association. But the council also has a role, and it has much to offer to support and recognise residents' associations and amenity societies, whether it's giving guidance to residents on how to establish a residents' association, acting as a facilitator by inviting such groups to come together and share best practice, or just to say thank you for all that unpaid work that they do for the residents in our borough. I too hope that the lead member for communities will help us recognise the great contribution of residents' associations and amenity societies through the introduction of this award, and so to help them grow further. And I would be very happy to offer my support in whatever way would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you. I will now open the motion up to debate. Councillor Hudd, we haven't heard from you today.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Good evening, all. First, I would like to welcome Councillor Ali back to the Chamber. I hope he's fully recovered. It's good to see you back. I wholly commend my colleague, Councillor Lord North's motion and thank him for bringing it to the Chamber. When we met residents of Camden Houses and Johnson House within Camden Ward, the constant complaint we heard was that they never felt heard. They felt they did not have voice. They felt very excluded. They felt lost. So when we introduced the idea of them to set up a residents' association, they were very excited about it, and which is Councillor North's forte. And as he mentioned, we have now very successfully set up 2 residents' association and talk in progress. This is the first meeting that we organised with Johnson House, with Octavia Housing, was very well attended, and Councillor Thalasitis very kindly agreed to say a few words at this meeting, and for which the residents were very, they were very pleased. There was somebody else besides just their local councillors who was happy to engage with them, which was very promising. I cannot stress enough how empowering the residents find RAs, and how they now all feel so much part of the local community. And they also look very much forward to meeting other residents' associations. As my colleague and friend, Councillor Gardner said, it does open up much wider horizons to them, and they do not feel excluded. Therefore, I hope all my colleagues and members across the Chamber will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. So, we can all agree RAs are good. But in my view, this motion really lays bare how utterly backwards the Tories' idea of community power and engagement really is. The council, we should be seeking approval from RAs, not the other way around. Effective RAs are antagonistic. They fight the top-down ordinances of the council, hold us to account, and effect policy changes, dragging us kicking and screaming where necessary. As the Conservatives are fond of saying, we in our communities know what is needed in our communities. In practice, however, plans are decided behind closed doors, convoluted and exclusionary so-called consultation events are held. Actually, they're closer to presentations than consultations, to convince RA leads to rubber stamp their predetermined plans. Many lead members in the room have actually seen, some of them last night, what happens when a community catches wind of these plans late in the process. And frankly, we should be empowering and deferring to as many residents' associations and amenities groups, etc., as possible from the earliest stages, if they're at all interested in representing their constituents and being fairer, etc. borough. Now, my next point is that RAs aren't equal. The RAs that exist are not at all equal. Many of them, especially the ones which enjoy close relationships with the council, have leads who, like many of our councillors here tonight, are wealthy and retired, having a great degree of comfort interacting with and making demands of authorities. No mechanism exists to ensure, furthermore, that an RA has any real mandate from residents. A steering group was set up to decide the future of Power Square Gardens years ago. It grants privileges in its terms of reference to a named resident association lead who was at the time dead. This wasn't changed in 4 years. It's not been addressed at all, in fact, while a majority of socially housed residents have been offered no special representation at all and deemed ineligible for RA status. I myself, as an RA lead, have had officers asking me to approve the use of our estate improvement budget, which, for anyone who isn't familiar, is for discretionary spending. It's to be decided by residents, to pay for years overdue, constitutionally mandated maintenance on the estate. Clearly, the council will happily sign off on this sort of thing with nothing but a single email from a name on the list, which in this case was me. The best RAs give a voice to the voiceless. Voiceless because of poverty, physical and mental vulnerabilities, language barriers, no recourse to public resources, etc., etc. Through great effort and personal cost, banging your head against the wall of RBKC is hugely taxing, requires huge amounts of time and energy, which, frankly, in North Kensington, very few people have. Now, those RAs that are intrinsically less able to effect changes due to the simple fact that their members are poorer, have less time, fewer resources, and are correctly, in my view, suspicious of authority. These are exactly the RAs to whom we should be offering direct material support. These RAs will also reject the notion of a pat on their head from the very institution they frequently have to battle to be heard by. It needs to come from the people. Grenfell Tower had an extraordinarily strong RA. The council refused to recognise it in favour of a defunct RA in Lancaster West. It was simply not active. And as we all now know, their repeated warnings were not only ignored by the council, but ridiculed, their members slandered. I have yet to see a more committed and knowledgeable residents' association. Would they be given a prize? Of course not. Would they accept one? Of course not. Again, the best RAs fight to take back power into their communities, and we here should be seeking their approval. Okay. Recognition amounts to a pat on the head, a privilege bestowed from above for playing the council's games. As we have seen time and time again, when a community says the wrong thing, this council shuts them down and shuts them out. So, being somewhat of a materialist, I have extremely low tolerance for gestures, pablum, box ticking. If the council takes the role of community groups at all seriously, it will strengthen democratic mechanisms, devolving power and decision-making to residents, and devolving that power democratically requires offering material support for RAs, informing them, in fostering resident engagement with them, in providing funding and resources, such as meeting rooms. My estate doesn't have anywhere to meet, by the way. Allocating more
Thank you very
liaison
much.
Opening more paths of communication. Can I conclude, please?
Sorry?
May I conclude?
If it's
15
brief,
seconds?
yes.
Okay, so, we can start by completely withdrawing the disingenuous, ineffective, and undemocratic so-called consultation process, which will be helpful to all of the lead members here who have had to cancel wrong-headed and destructive projects months or years into their planning because they haven't involved the community. It's a fig leaf. And to summarise, the idea of having communities dance for our approval is backwards, grotesque, and insulting. It is we who should be begging for those communities' approval, by giving them a
thank you
voice
very
and
much.
surrendering our powers to them. Thank you.
Councillor Whedon-Sands.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I want to commend my colleague, Councillor North, on bringing this motion forward. And whilst I don't approve of everything that Councillor Benton said in his speech, I'm very glad to see that with London Fashion Week round the corner, we're fantastically sartorially dressed. I love the Pocket Square. All I would start by saying really is I want to pay tribute, as my colleagues did here. It's really incredible to hear stories both from Councillor Benton and Councillor Gardner on how resident associations brought them into politics and gave them a way and their communities a voice. And so in that, I want to pay tribute to our own RAs in Queensgate that Councillor Lane and I have gotten to know intimately since living in the area and being chosen as candidates. We have many, many fantastic RAs. I won't name them all in case I forget any and upset the others. But I think particularly that stand out, I want to pay tribute to Vrara and its chairman, Mr. Bach, who last year celebrated their 40th anniversary. Looking at Mr. Bach, you wouldn't think he was that old. But they have achieved great successes over the last 40 years, preserving and protecting the importance and the beauty of our community in our area. So many of the important things that we highlighted earlier today in the local plan. They've restored Victorian lighting. They weren't successful in keeping the Waitrose on the Gloucester Road, unfortunately, but it was replaced by a Partridge's. So I think, swings and roundabouts, you can't win them all. But they do play such an important part. And I think really the areas that have engaged in active RAs show the benefit that they can be brought, both in terms of their interactions and their relationships with councillors and with the council, but also in terms of the community feeling with each other. So I think this is a very, very important motion that Councillor North has brought forward. I think it'd be a fantastic thing for the council to do to bring back this gold standard scheme, and also to do more as well in helping those areas that don't have RAs or might have RAs that have been struggling, to give them more guidance and support to do exactly what they are meant to do and hold us to account and make sure that we're properly representing our residents, as I'm sure they do and try to across the borough. So thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I hope, despite some of the strong passion and feeling we've heard earlier tonight, that we can, at the end of the debate, all come together and support what I hope is an apple and pie nice motion. Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll take one more from each side. So I will take Councillor Bakhtiar, and I will take Councillor Taylor-Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I have served as a member of the Planning Application Committee for 8 years, during which I have learned about the great contributions made by RAs, amenity societies, and other individuals. They have always been guiding the council. I appreciate what they do for our communities, and I am in support of an official recognition and award for their hard work and contributions. However, I don't believe this is enough. The RA members that I have met throughout the years were doing their best to share their expertise and serve their communities and never ask for any awards or recognitions. I have stated many times in this chamber that we have residents who are experts in a variety of fields who are willing to assist and advise the councillors and the council. But the council didn't do very much to include them and reach out to them. The council's community outreach isn't working too well, and our consultations are even worse. Nearly 6 years after the Grenfell Tower national disaster, and our engagement is still negative. Councillors Toby Benton, Abdullah Noor, Muna Adam, and myself attended last night's Portobello Market planning meeting, which was attended by more than 60 residents and traders. A similar number attended another meeting for traders that day. Almost everyone was unhappy and not aware of the council plans and the way the council conducted its online consultations during COVID, which excluded a very large number of our residents. Only around 200 people took part, this is in Colville, took part in the council's consultations in 2021. And we had more than 100 unhappy residents and traders yesterday alone. This proves once more that the council's consultations were not conducted fairly. Madam Deputy Mayor, the leader of the council and her leadership team had been saying that they have improved their communications with residents after Grenfell Tower tragedy. But our residents are saying that they can't see and feel the change. To award our resident associations and remind ourselves of this tragedy and its impact, I would like to suggest to the council leader, Councillor Elizabeth Campbell, and the Chief Executive, Maxine Holdsworth, to do the following. One, to arrange a visit for all councillors to see inside Grenfell Tower, to understand what had happened, and the need for a real change and a better engagement with our residents and businesses. Two, to arrange a meeting with the most active groups in the borough to talk about the possibility of establishing the Borough Citizens Advisory Panel as a new way to reach out to our residents. Members of this panel will include volunteers from borough residents who have developed an expertise in their professional backgrounds and are willing to share it with the council. This is how this council could reward the resident associations and award them, by including them in decision-making process and rebuilding trust. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I know there are several people who want to speak. We still have to take a vote. And Kim, can you speak briefly? And then we will ask the whips how they want to proceed. Sorry? No, we're going to do that as well, of course. Don't worry, you'll have your moment of fame.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you. So thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor, and I do honestly can speak briefly. I think just listening to this motion, I just wanted to single out Residents Association, who really are absolutely vital and who work tirelessly, and that's the Residents Associations on our own housing estates, on our social housing, who come to the TCC and they contribute, they give their time, they're not paid for their time. And it's very important, I think, Councillor Benton, you know, that you receive some form of training from our community engagement team, or better still, go and talk to your father, who's been a fantastic contributor at the TCC, and you'll learn how much the residents of our borough shape everything we do as far as their housing. They make the decisions about what kind of windows they're going to have. The estate improvement grant, it's not for repairs, that's for things like having gym equipment out in the garden, or those sort of things which are up to the residents themselves to determine. It's over and above the commitment that we have. So I think, again, in terms of policy, the latest tenancy terms and conditions, all those aspects are all items that are the responsibility for the tenants that take the trouble to come to our TCC meetings. And that's not just TCC, we also got leaseholder meetings, disabled residents meetings, independent home meetings. And I very much encourage for you, when you're going out talking to your residents, to get them to come along and contribute. It's not about casework, it's not about chucking bricks or anything at all, or giving speeches about subjugation of our residents. You know, it's all about working and shaping our services. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor McMay, the lead member, up to 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Well, there's been a lot of discussion here, and it's been very far-ranging, and thank you, Councillor North, for bringing this. I think we're all I thought we were all in agreement how wonderful RAs are, but I think definitely I am, at any rate, and I think all the colleagues who have spoken have been. And I just want to say that recently we've seen how incredible and how much work they've done in the South Kensington Inquiry, which has been an incredible force where the Kensington Society, the Brompton Association and local resident associations from Courtfield and Brompton and Handstown have come together to support the council in the decision to oppose the very insensitive development. And so just a huge thank you to all those incredibly committed residents. And as we say, they're all volunteers, they're all unpaid. They've all become incredible experts, which is incredible. But we also have to acknowledge that not everybody can or wants to be in an RA, and nor does everybody always agree with their RA. And so as a council, we need to be mindful of this and to make sure we try to hear and act on the many different voices we can. And that just brings me back to a point that Councillor Bakhtir made about the Citizens Panel. And this is something that we have set up already, following the Charter for Public Participation report. And many thanks to all the officers working on this. And just before Christmas, on a very cold, rainy, wintry night, we had about 100 residents in the town hall. And we were asking them all sorts of questions, round tables about the council plan. So they really were feeding back into the council plan. And the diversity of the citizens panel does represent our borough. It's from all across the borough, all ages, though to be honest we are missing young workers, probably for understandable reasons. Though we are getting the young voice from our new youth council, which is fantastic. And the students, the youth council, they came out to the Al-Manar Mosque on a cold December evening, just before Christmas, to discuss the council plan, which was fantastic. Didn't see that many local councillors there. And then this brings me to a point which Councillor Benton made, which I can understand that, you know, not everybody agrees with how everything is done. But as ward councillors, we do have responsibilities to check public databases, and if we see that someone who is supposed to be in charge of an RA is no longer around, then please do let the council know. I mean, we are local ward representatives, and this is what we do. And I know in Brompton and Handstown, my colleague, Councillor Waller Idris, was absolutely instrumental in setting up a fantastic residents' association, the Cadogan Square Residents' Association, so thank you. Back to the gold standard. Yeah, we don't have the budget to do a massive kind of, you know, top-down approach here. We are talking about a light touch approach. We are very much saying to the RAs, you let us know if you meet certain criterias. And it's very much kind of talking about a self-certifying standard, because of course we trust our residents. We know that they know best how to represent their area. But Lloyd does make, Councillor North does make a very important point about, you know, we need to have the kind of, you know, we can have criteria and standards, and we can help residents join together more. So thank you for that. And just finally, thank you to all the volunteers and residents who really do make our borough fantastic. And without them, we could, as ward councillors, can't do our job. They feed back to us all the things that, you know, we know. They're the voice on the ground. So thank you. Thank you to everyone. Thank you for bringing this motion.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. And now, Councillor North, would you like to sum up?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. I thought that this motion would be supported across the chamber. So I apologise to Councillor Benton if he's seeing something sinister here, but the type of thing that resident associations are telling me, and since this motion was mooted, a lot of them have contacted me. They want help getting a newsletter together. They want help organising a bank account. They want to help how to conduct their meetings. If you're having trouble finding rooms, come to the town hall. They've got loads of meeting rooms here. They will help you. The officers will help you find a room. If not, some of them do it in a local pub. It really is quite easy. All we're talking about is recognition and support. It's a positive motion, and I really genuinely hope it gets support from across the chamber, because I've just been helping one of our resident associations design a newsletter. It's a simple little thing, but it shows that we're helping them and they can report back to us. So I do hope that it is supported across the chamber, and more importantly, all the residents that are watching tonight, and I know there are a lot watching tonight for this because they've told me they're going to watch, they'll be watching their councillors. Do they support this motion or do they not? So I would say thank you to the lead member. Thank you very much. I didn't expect when I started this that we would get the Gold Standard Award. So I'm very grateful that we've gone the extra mile. And remember, our aim is to be the best council. And our first pillar is to support those communities. And I believe that this motion does that, and it does it in spades. So I encourage the whole chamber to support the motion and to support all our resident associations and to help them help us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor North. I now put the motion to the vote. Would those for the motion please show? Would those against the motion please show? Are there any abstentions? I declare the motion carried. Is the mayor here? No? Okay. We have an appointment. I'd like to ask the whips if it's possible to just address the appointments. Are you happy with that, Councillor Larry? Okay. Here we are. Okay. Are there any appointments to be made? Councillor Thalasitis?
Yes, yes. Can I please move the appointments in my name?
Seconder? Thank you. That's it. Are they agreed? Yes? That concludes the business of this evening's meeting of the Council, and the next meeting of the Council is the budget meeting, which is scheduled to be held on the 1st of March. Is it at 5 o'clock, Johnny? 5:30. Good evening.